Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Ko te mihi tuatahi ki te Atawa, nāna nei nā mea katoa, ko te mihi tuarua ki tēnei whare, te whare aurua, tēnā koe. E mihi tēnei ki ngā mātai katoa, e ngā mātai haere, 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 moi mai rā. E mihi tēnei ki te hunga ora hei taunei, tēnā koutou. Nau mai haere mai ki ngā kauni hira, kai kauni hira, kua tai mai nei mō tēnei hui. Nau mai haere mai ki a mātou hoa mahi, ngā mihi mō te mahi. And nau mai haere mai ki a mātou manuhiri, kua eki mai nei mō tēnei hui, tēnā koutou. E hara hau e te tangata mōhio ki te kōrero i te rao Māori, o te rā e tike ana kia mihi atu, kia mihi mai. Ko taku wāwata ki te onori te ao Māori. Me mihi a hau ki a koutou katoa mō te pūma o te kaupapa. E kore atu au, e mutu aku mihi. Nō reira, kia kaha ta hoi ta waka, aha koe ngā piki me ngā hiki, me haere tunu o tātou nei kōrero. Ko tō raurau, ko taku raurau, ka ora ai te iwi. Tēnā koutou. Me inoi tātou, he honore, he karoe ki te atua, he mongaronga ki te whenua, he whakaro pai ki ngā tangata katoa. Aia nei, aki nei. Nō reira, e pā e te mātou i te rangi, whakapai a mātou i tēnei rā, me ngā kaupapa kei mua i a mātou i tēnei rā. I runga o te ingoa o iu karaiti. Amen. All right, we have 3 apologies today that I've got. We've got Councillors Dowsing, Whare Hinga and Akwata Brown. Move it. Moved by Councillor Burdett, second by Your Worship. No declarations of interest. Okay, we're going to confirmation of the non-confidential minutes. Moved by Councillor Burdett. Second by Councillor Hughes, and we have from those minutes, Councillor Hughes was in attendance at the last meeting, but he's not noted. So if we have that corrected, please. Any matters arising? Councillor Seymour.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can I just ask if there's an update on 10.3 on page 11, which is around the agreement for the provision of museum services? And the meeting was the 18th of February, which we're looking at the minutes. So is that finalised yet?
Who's got that?
Ms. Sutherland. Sorry, through the chair, I don't think there's any update at this stage.
Councillor Foster.
Yeah, thank you. Just on the minutes, 3.1, the 1,000-year bridge project. Is there an update at all on what's happening with the descoping the original plans?
So through the chair, I'd hope to have heard back from Lotteries by today. We have submitted a revised plan and a program budget to Lotteries for their consideration. So we are waiting to hear back on whether or not that's acceptable from them. So we are waiting to find back. It was a week and a half ago. It normally takes a couple of weeks for us to hear back from Lotteries. The team are following up.
Thanks for that. Did I see another hand over here? No? All right, we had that moved by Councillor Burdett. I didn't pick up the seconder. Councillor Robinson. Your Worship. No, that was the apologies. Yeah, Councillor Hughes. Thank you. All those in favour? Against? Carried. Action sheet. Anything from that, please?
So I'll just quickly pick it up if that's all right, Chair, around 2.1, that 1,000-year walkway bridge we will have at the next available meeting. It won't be necessarily at Ops, it will be as soon as we have that decision back from Lotteries, we'll be able to bring it to the next council or committee meeting as soon as we're able to. The reason that hadn't been updated is we'd hoped we'd been able to update it before the agenda went out, and we just haven't heard anything.
All right, thank you. Councillor Hughes.
Just a question on, is it 1.1, the temporary measures around speed in Stout Street? Is there any update on that?
So through the chair, the team have been out with GHD to look at those installations. We have the funding available from the 1st of July to go through with the full changes that we'll be putting in place from there. So those will start being rolled out from the 1st of July once that funding becomes available that was approved by the committee.
Okay. All right, if there's nothing further from the action sheet, we go into the governance work plan, which is page 15. All those items are for this meeting, so, yep, all good. Right, we have no leave of absence, no acknowledgements and tributes. All right, we'll move on to public input. We have Maurice Fraser here. He's going to give us something on the rail line. So welcome, Maurice. Gillian's here as well, I think. You come right up the front here. So the process is you've got 15 minutes for your presentation.
Yep.
We're not going to be debating this, but you may get some questions for clarity from the councillors.
Yes, that's fine.
Thanks.
Could I briefly just welcome Maurice as well? Ko Gillian Ward Aho, tēnā tātou katoa. Maurice has given to councillors a thorough introduction of himself and his company, Fraser Geologics Limited, which is the main consulting company in geotechnical engineering that Kiwi Rail use. And his company has produced the main part of the 2019 Burl feasibility study into the railway line. And this is the first opportunity really we've taken to present part of the Burl report to councillors. I welcome you to read this, which is very readable and easily available online as well. So thank you very much, Maurice, for being here.
Thank you.
You can stand or sit, whichever is
I'll
your
probably
preference.
stand actually because I tend to wave my arms around and I'll probably, if I get too close, I'll smack you.
Yeah.
Apologies.
Yeah.
So look, my background is geotech engineering, civil engineering. I've been doing it for 30 odd years since I graduated from Auckland University, and I've worked on and off for Kia Rail as a consultant for 20 plus years. So I've got a bit of background in the rail environment. And we've been engaged to look at the railway line since about 2012, 2013, in terms of how we repair it and what the issues are. So there was a 40 odd pages would have gone out as sort of a summary document, which has got lots of background photos and various things. So that should give you a good idea of what the track looks like. I'll just bounce through a little bit of some of the repair solutions to give you some idea of how we put the numbers together and give you some confidence that we have actually done a reasonably thorough job in terms of pricing the exercise. So just to start, obviously we're talking about the stretch of line in here along the coast. There's about 40 different tasks on that particular stretch of line. Sorry, let's go back and find the pointer. So you can see here, we start pretty much Maraitaha, come through along Beach Loop, down into the Whaiwhaiwhara Valley. You can see the various pictures here of what the issues are. Quite remarkable landslides. As a geologist, they're really exciting. As an engineer, they're a bit disappointing because you've got to fix them. But you go out there, you see the sort of damage that occurs. You get a appreciation of Mother Nature and what she does. And again, southern stuff. Just a couple of quick photos give you a sense of how it looks. This is Beach Loop. See the track running through into the distance. Some of the landscape out here is as good as what you'll see in Kaikoura or on the Midland line. So you've got a patch of rail here that is quite spectacular. This is looking south. This is Tunnel 23 running into the Tikawata Valley. The old Tikawata railway camp was up on the facing here when they were there in the late 1930s. They had a couple hundred people living out there. This is down into the Tikawata Valley. This is Tunnel 23, daylights here. You can see there's an old public works road running up through here, an old sort of farm track. There's these sort of access points all over the place to get into the railway corridor. And then this is down in the Kukupawhara Valley. This is dropout 6 here. Opatama, just again some visuals. And this is the coastal section, there's Waikokupu, and then looking south along Blacks Beach and Nuhaka's in the distance, down through there. So basically I've done quite a bit of work for Kia Rail in the last 20 years. We've priced the job, treating it as a civil project rather than a rail project. There's been quite a bit of debate in the media that Kia Rail is saying it's going to cost a lot more than we've priced it as. And really fundamentally the difference is Kia Rail have a different pricing structure because of the way they have to operate in a rail corridor. So when you've got live trains going past or you're in a live railway corridor, just the level of protection you need for people and equipment and access. We're doing work at the moment in some of the rail works in Auckland, and the contractors are getting 2 hours a day. So they're paying people for 8 hours, they're getting 2, maybe 3 hours effective a day, which, so things cost 4 times as much as they should because you're only doing, 20 or 30 or maybe 40% of what you should be doing. At the moment, on P2P, which is a Papakura to Pukekohe electrification, they're doing super Sundays when there's no trains. And they're going from 6 in the morning to 4:30 in the afternoon. And they get more done on one Sunday than they get done on the rest of the week. So if you think about rail, there's a lot of processes to keep people safe in it. And the biggest issue they have is the human factor. You can have all the paperwork you want and all the issues, but you still get people doing dumb things. So that's why they tend to cost a lot. We have done a full schedule of items. So we've actually broken down the 40 odd tasks into what each is going to cost, how much material do we need, what's our access costs, how much piping, how much geogrid, how much concrete. We've actually broken it down and done a full schedule. So normally if you're putting out tenders, you'll give a schedule to the contractor the price. We've actually gone through and priced it as a schedule items. We've got 105,000 man hours on the job. So I just jump back a bit because I leave you here. Just going back a bit, we've established overland access is probably the best way to get in to do these repairs, and you've got some really good forestry contractors in Gisborne that build some really hairy forestry roads everywhere. Sometimes they have issues with forestry roads, but these guys are pretty good. They're some of the best in the business you have in the district. So getting into some of the tricky stuff we think is pretty doable with your local contractors. And the adopted solutions are industry standards. So I'll show you a few photos of what we're proposing to build, and we've built them everywhere else. Coming back to the existing railway assets, they're in really good condition for their age. They were built in the 1930s and 40s, so they're 80 years old, but they're actually better than most of the other lines in the country because A, they haven't had a lot of trains over them, and B, they built them really well. The track is reasonably good. It needs new rails and new sleepers in places and some more ballast, but it's generally in good condition. All the things we're proposing, we've done on the Kia Rail network before. All the tasks are typical Kia Rail tasks. Sorry, my fingers are going. And the biggest thing is logistics. How do you get in there? How do you build things? How do you get your materials in and your people in and that? Once you've got those sorted, then you're generally good to go. And then the majority of the spend is local. So about 70% of the spend is actually in Gisborne or from Gisborne contractors or local aggregates or local labour. So most of the $36 odd million is spent locally, just to put it in context. So there's a spreadsheet again. Like I said, it's fully scheduled, so we could put that out for indicative tender pricing from contractors tomorrow if people wanted to do it. We've got enough there, and there's enough drawings that people can at least throw a check number against what we've done. And we did this as part of our pricing 2 years ago. What's it going to cost? Mr. Contractor, give us a number. We've gone through and done that exercise. So just coming back to the site itself, this is just beach loop. Beach loop's coming down through here. We've just sort of dotted on a few access tracks that we need to put in using our forestry contractors to get down into the 4 different dropouts, which are D1, 2, 3, and 4. Southern part of the site, this is on the southern side of the Tikawata Tunnel. There's small dropout 5 and a slightly bigger dropout 6, and there's road access down Railway Road and an old construction road they built in the 1930s to get into the site. Looking at the key issue is the 6 major dropouts that have washed out. Everything else is more like maintenance and drainage and culverts. In terms of the dropouts, the first dropout 1, It's basically 25 metre high reinforced slope. Basically, the existing track is quite pinnacle and it's eroded away. We just need to butt some fill in against it and give it a bit more seismic capacity. The second and third dropout are right along Beach Loop itself. The solution there is basically anywhere between a 12 and 14 metre high retaining wall with geogrids, put the track on top. I'll show you some photos of what that looks like in a second. That's the front face elevation. So just hold that shape in your mind for a second. The dropout 4 is a little bit more complicated. There's quite a big fill needed in here. The actual depth of washout's about 32 metres from track level down to the base of the gully. Again, that's a combination of quite a big retained slope and then a reinforced fill on top using local soils, and the top half of it needs to be local soil cohesive fill to act as a dam. So if we get any water build up, it doesn't wash through and wash it out again. So there's a bit more complication on that one, but it's pretty straightforward. That's a sort of a front view over here. So 20 odd metres of retaining wall, 10 metres of embankment. That's another side view of it. And then, so coming back to the sort of things we're proposing to build, this is Bridge 206 north of Tauranui. This is an online bridge replacement. That bridge is around 14 metres high. So if you look at that, you can sort of see it's retaining walls both sides holding up a track. We obviously only need half a wall because we're butting into the pretty decent geology. And give you a sense of it, that's what a cross section looks like in engineering terms. So that's 14.7 metres high from top to bottom. We would only be building one face and running grids back in and meeting the ground on the back side. So that's Bridge 206 as it stands. If you put dropout 2 and 3 over it, that's about the basic shape. So you're literally, we're building half of this on 2 different dropouts, and we've solved the problem. So we're proposing things that have been built elsewhere in the network. We know what they cost, we know how to build them. We just need to get in there to be able to do it. And again, this is a couple of photos just to finish off on the sort of what these walls look like. This is Minga Bluff down on State Highway 73. This wall curves around here, runs for 300 metres. It's quite a complicated wall. It curves in 3 dimensions, so it curves this way around the bluff, it curves that way under the road, and it rises 5 metres from one end to the other because it's following the rail grade. So we took 3 different surveying firms to get it set out correctly. But again, you can see it's just blocks with trains going past. You can see the curve starting to run up here. Standard construction equipment. The reinforcing is basically a thing called Paraweb, which runs back into your backfill. Sorry, find the right button. This is your geogrid layout. You run in hard fill over the top to reinforce it, hold it together. You're using reasonable sized construction plant to build it, rollers, diggers, dumpers, and your thing's finished. So that's basically the sort of things we're proposing to do, and we've built them several places. There's another one down at State Highway 73 at Hokitika, same sort of thing. These are about 7 or 8 metres high here, and finished, they look like that. So I'm sorry, I've tried to rip through that very quickly, but I'm just trying to give you a sense that we have actually had a good look at it. We're pretty confident on the numbers we've done. We've checked it with industry, and I'm more than happy to come back at a future date and have a bit more of a deep dive if there is such a thing, to give more information.
Yeah, thanks for that. I'll start with a couple of questions. Who commissioned this, and is it going to Rail or Kiwi Rail?
It's been to Kiwi Rail. It was commissioned by Bill, so we were engaged by Bill.
Oh, okay, so that's the...
Yep.
Your worship.
Thank you for that, Morris. Very interesting. So as you're well aware, we're not the owners of the railway line, but as a council, we see value in having transport security, different modes that give us transport resilience. So that's why we as a council support this. Next question is, we've been part of lots of working groups, met with Ganesh, had the bill reports, and it feel the goalpost always shifts. So the
Yes.
question I want to ask of you is, what would be a next step? What do you recommend? Because you are working with Kiwi Rail, they've seen your numbers, we've seen the new numbers coming out. We've been talking to our local MPs because they would, at the end of the day, be making decisions in regards to where funding possibly go. We have no input into that.
Yep.
But what would you recommend as a next step for us to take this up and with whom?
To be fair to Kiwi Rail, they're completely overloaded with the work streams they have going at the moment. So they're flat out in Auckland network. They've got issues in Wellington Metro. They've got renewals and Ringham and repair and maintenance projects all across the country. So this is a project too far for them, I think, internally as a project, and that's part of the resistance you're getting is Kiwi Rail just don't have the resources to put their mind to this particular project. I think there's quite a few people in Kiwi Rail, my understanding is that they see the value of it, but they can't see themselves how to take it forward under the way their business as usual processes generally cost substantially more than a straight civil project would cost, just because of the issues I was describing before, the protection, the rail, the layers of safety they put on things. Not to say you can't have that, but there are ways to be clever about it. So it needs someone to lead a process. I think discussions need to be had. How can we take this on as a civil project run independently of Kiwi Rail, fix the track, give it back to them? I think that would be the bypass loop in the system. Let's work out what it's going to cost to fix it. Let's take a separate lease on the line for 18 months or whatever the program is, get it fixed, do it to your standards, make sure you're happy with it, have it back, run the trains. I think that's
just supplementary to that, you say, let's do this, do it to your standards. Who is the person who's the entity you're referring to? Because you just said let's do it independently from Kiwi Rail.
Yeah, so it's the stumbling block is there needs to be an entity that's prepared to come on board and do the business, if you will.
Are you aware of any entity like that?
No, I think that's part of the conversations people are having. How do we make it? What entity do we pull together? Is it a combination of Gisborne District and Hawke's Bay Regional? Is there some private investment in it that's been talked about before? Is there someone prepared to take it on board and push it through? So I think there's those sorts of options you've got to think about.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Councillor Robinson.
Thanks, Morris. Great presentation. I thought the figure said 26 up there, but then you said 36.
Yes. So our base cost was 22 million for the civil works for the 40, and then we added 20%. So we got to 22 million, and we built about 20% contingency into our numbers. Put another 20% on, got to 26, and then there's another 10 million on top of that for rail and a yard and a few other bits and pieces at the Gisborne end. So the base civil cost is about 22.
Councillor Bidet.
Thank you for that. I was a council observer for all those rail meetings. Kiwi Rail continuously reminded us they owned the line and they would make the decision, the final decision, despite the good intentions. So what's changed, apart from them saying no, and you're quite right, in their minds this is way over there.
It has to be a political decision. I think if you're going to get this to happen, you have to figure out a political way to make it happen. Sorry, I think that's the answer.
Yeah.
I think going to Kiwi Rail, you'll bash your head against the wall. You know, we went through this process with Brill for 3 or 4 months last year, and every time they come up with something, we could answer back. But ultimately, if you want it to happen, it needs to be a political decision. You need to go to them and say, here's a mechanism that we can do it with. We can do it this way. Take it off Kiwi Rail. We'll lease you. They lease the lines. They lease lines out. So you say, you just want to lease the line. We'll fix it. We'll give it back to you. You know, that's a little bit creative, but fundamentally, you've got a lease. You've got an asset. You've got to fix it. You've got to maintain it. You've got to give it back to them. So.
Councillor Worsnop, Councillor Sheldon, Councillor Seymour.
Pretty sure I wasn't first, but never mind. So I can see from your slides that there are many, many kilometres potentially of access tracks needed. That's the first question is, are they incorporated into this cost?
Yes.
And secondly, I presume that the entity is proposed to involve council, and my experience of council is that our bureaucracy is at least as big as Kiwi Rail's. in terms of the hoops that we're required to jump through. So, you know, how will our rules, especially around things like health and safety and consenting, because consenting is frequently where the bird's nests are, be any more streamlined than Kiwi Rail's?
Well, there's a couple of answers there at various level of responses. The first answer is forgiveness is easier to get than permission. So sometimes it's easier just to figure out a way to do things and say, this is what we're going to do and how do we make this happen, instead of saying, why can't we do this? It's why, you know, how can we do this? It's the approach you take is the first thing. The second thing is there's a thing called the New Zealand Railways Act 1992, which pretty much allows you to do just about anything anywhere in the network. So you can do just about anything to fix stuff if you have to in terms of railways. The third thing is we're not doing anything that isn't being done before. So we're not pushing the envelope in terms of engineering solutions or things like that. We build forestry tracks every other week in Gisborne. We build these structures 2 or 3 times a year. You know, we're doing stuff that's pretty standard. So we know what they cost, we know what the issues are, we know what the consenting requirements are, and we can make that all available. We've done quite a bit of work in Gisborne recently where we've done it with engineers PS1, PS2, and it's been building consent exempt. So that's another mechanism to get around some of the main structures work. You've really only got about 6 structures you have to build. And then the rest is just track maintenance and culverts, which is pretty much committed activity anyway.
The access tracks are included in that costing?
Yes. So we priced it for rail access to start. So we had about $4 million in there to use wagons and locos and get material in and out. And when we started doing the numbers, we get in about 400 to 500 cubic meters of material a day. And when you work out what you need, it just doesn't work. And then you suddenly run into this issue with track protection, track access, having to, you know, all the rail issues that come with having a live rail. And so we took that budget and reworked it into putting in forestry tracks and then doing it all by civil works, and actually come out about $500,000 cheaper. So.
Thank you. So a time frame, if you got the green light today, what would be your estimate of a time frame to have it operational?
You'd be under 12 months.
Supplementary, just make sure I got this right. So it's really going on the existing track the whole way. Yep. Where there big slippers, it's not going inland, or it's rebuilding the whole thing.
It's just rebuilding.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Very interesting. How current was the 36 million? Because we just.
So that was that would have been early 2020 numbers, just at the beginning, you know, running into the early part of the pandemic lockdown dramas. So it's still reasonably current. I think you'd probably, depending how long this process takes, you go back and just check that number, because cement's gone up a bit, diesel's a bit more expensive, etc. But I still think we're within the ballpark. We're not out by very far at all.
Thank you. And probably my next question is more directed to those who are pushing. That's getting it operational, but the issue that has always been one of the other stumbling blocks is the ongoing maintenance and volume of use. So has anyone looked at that?
There's been quite a bit of work done on the freight volumes going out of Gisborne and coming in. So there's around 5 train loads of freight a week going out. So there's roughly between 15 and 20 wagon loads of containers a day of freight leave Gisborne. Coming in, there's a bit less. And obviously, and that's just containerised freight. There's also obviously logs go everywhere. You've got things like squash in season, this 3-month squash season. So there's the seasonal peak material as well. So a lot of the freight work was done by Weatherall Transport, Steve Weatherall, and he was pretty confident he could make the freight side of the equation work.
Thank you. Thanks
Okay, last one, Councillor Foster.
Yeah, thank you. Do you know if the Wairau to Napier line that's open at the moment has been financially viable, or is financially viable at the moment?
That I don't know. I know it's been reopened. I know they've got the log yard up and running at Wairau, but I'm just not sure what the traffic's doing on it at the moment. Part of the issue with that line is you almost need the freight from Gisborne to justify the Wairau to Napier, but you know, Napier to Wairau, if you're just doing logs, it's a bit of an orphan. If you've got another freight train a day coming through and going back, then you've actually got there's much more justification for Wairau and Napier taking back on Gisborne. So.
All right, thanks very much for that. Very informative.
All right.
Are you leaving those for us?
I'll give you an electronic. I just wanted to show that
Yeah.
we have done an awful lot of paperwork, and I spared you all this. It's all summarised. I understand you guys have a lot to read, so but there's definitely paper for Africa if you would like to read it.
Thank you.
Okay.
Awesome. I'd like to welcome Sheldon Drummond. We've got a presentation on Aratu and eland progressing land revegetation in our forested areas. Sit or stand.
Morena, I'm Sheldon Drummond. I have quite a history in the forest industry here. Currently, I'm Managing Director of a company called Elands. With me is Neil Woods, Chief Executive of Aratu Forests, one of the larger local companies in forestry. So this morning we've come together to chat to you about a new initiative in the forest industry, looking at really repatriating and doing things a lot better in the catchment area of production forestry in the region. Yeah, so you can see it a bit better. And we call this project the Riparian Project. I think it's useful for a start just to take a few minutes and talk about the history of land use changes on the East Cape over time. So within 1,000 years of the Waihao eruption, which was probably the most significant event for many centuries, much of the East Coast region was heavily forested and dense podocarp and coastal native. And it stayed that way for a long, long time until settlers came 1860 to 1940. A lot of the forest was felled and burnt to clear the land for sheep farming, particularly in the lowlands. So by 1950, it was pretty evident that land erosion in this region was becoming very significant. And from 1957, the government stepped up and they started to plant some forests. There was Ruatoria forest, Tokomaru forest, Mangatu forests were planted for erosion purposes, and then Wharirata and Tauranui forests were planted for timber production in an effort to actually save what was left of the native forests, the rimu and what have you, and provide an alternative timber to build homes. So further from that, Cyclone Bowler. There's a few faces around the table here that would remember Bowler in 1988, and government stepped in yet again and subsidised in large areas of previous farmland. Cleared land were planted on exotic forest. With further ongoing plantings, these forests, of course, have evolved into what we have today, which is a pretty major industry, employer and economic giant for the region. But if you look at the geology and the climate and that land use and the impact on this region, of course, the East Coast region, as many of you realise, is actually the youngest landform in the world. It's the most recently uplifted en masse Cretaceous mudstone. And of course, it still hasn't reached its natural angle of repose. It's constantly shifting. Extensive land use clearance has exacerbated that natural erosion. And we've planted a lot of it, but some of it is very deep seated and it carries on in the likes of Mangatu and Ruatoria under the existing forest cover. So in short, we're up against it here. You know, we have quite a unique situation. Exacerbating it even further, of course, are climatic events, which are becoming more prevalent over recent years. They tell us it's going to get worse, and these trigger mass erosion events on our fragile soil. So plantation forestry, there's been a huge amount of work done over the years by the experts measuring the difference between native forests that we once had, plantation forests that we've now got some of the land covered in, scrub lands, pasture lands, etc., and what holds the land up the best. And plantation forest does its job, but the plantation forest brings other issues, which, you know, really bug this region and is a major detriment, I guess you'd call it, to the forest industry, with the likes of climatic events and the waste wood coming down hillsides, ending up going down creeks on the likes of Tolaga Bay Beach. That is untenable, and Aratu and elands have come together to try to make a solution to this. That's what we're talking about here today, a snapshot of. So to resolve these issues, we think we need a dual approach. First of all, we need to remove the log waste off the hillsides, the non-merchantable log that's grown. Some of it is trees that are standing dead, they're not merchantable, can't use them for building houses or whatever, so they get tipped over and they get left on the hill. And then because we are unfortunately gone predominantly into log export as our markets, log export is all on fixed length logs, and so you end up with a lot of offcuts, which we commonly call around here slash. So we need to get that wood and find a valuable use for it. That's another project that we're working on. We're not talking about that in detail today. What we are talking about today is stabilising the land where harvesting has occurred and stop the remaining debris and silt ending up in the waterways and heading on down to populated zones. So we plan to resolve this by creating permanent forests within all the riparian zones, the steep and unstable areas, and environmentally sensitive areas which are now deemed unsuitable for plantation forests. So for a number of years now, the council have been saying to the industry, look, you need to stay off certain classes of land, you need to stay off certain gradients of land, you need to stay back from the rivers, but actually those areas are left to revert. And if you have a close look at those areas over long periods of time, they don't actually revert very well. They tend to go into weeds, blackberry, infested with goats, etc., etc. You've actually got to do something quite positive to make a change. So after a couple of years following the 2018 event at Tolaga Bay, the flood there, which did so much damage, elands and Aratu forests have signed a 90-year agreement for elands to take over those lands I've just been talking about, which would no longer be planted in exotic production forest. So that's pretty significant. When you talk about permanent forest, it's not something that happens tomorrow. It's not something that happens next week, next year, or even in the next decade or three. It takes a long time. So it's a really big step up for a forest company with all that money invested. These guys own most of their land to actually sign it over for 90 years. So elands has the right to plant and manage areas within Aratu's forest estate, which they've deemed to be no longer suitable for production forestry as we have known it. So starting this year with approximately 180 hectares inland from Tolaga, Te Maranga, elands will plant permanent native forest barriers, which will protect the waterways from slash and siltation. It'll be a range of native species. So on the stream sides will be the likes of flax. There will be some larger areas of manuka, and there will also be bands of larger podocarp trees, which will form a real barrier for landslide type deluge. We believe that whatever you do as an environmental solution needs to have a commercial outcome. And that is why we're going down a track of planting some quite large areas in there where it's suitable with manuka. You may be aware that the manuka in New Zealand has been studied quite extensively by Scion and others. More than 70% of it is now past maturity, and a lot more of it's sort of tipping over the edge. Mānuka has a lifespan of 25 to 35 years in terms of its flowering and nectar production. So that's an industry in decline, and it won't carry on unless we actually have some real change and investment in there. So that's kind of how we're proposing to pay for this initially. Mānuka also is a nurse crop for native forest. That's why it has a shorter lifespan, so other species come up. You've got flax along riversides, that brings the birds. The birds will bring the seed of other native trees. So that's a very long-term project. So as well as a primary conservation purpose, this initiative will provide significant benefit to the forest and the apiary industry, as well as enhanced employment for local communities, increased high-value exports, and also carbon sequestration, because a lot of those lands have never actually been planted. So it'll help us with the national agreement with the Paris Accord. This project is a game changer for New Zealand forest industry. It hasn't been done before, hasn't been contemplated seriously by plantation forest owners in New Zealand. And it really has the backing of Gisborne District Council, local iwi, and so on. So we've been working with your good people for, I guess, 18 months to work our way through things. Tell you a little bit about Elands, the company that's fronting it with Tauranui. Elands is an environmental land use business. It helps landowners ensure their land is put to best use for a sustainable and economically profitable future. So Elands has got quite a history in terms of native forest management, carbon and nitrogen sequestration, particularly over the Taupo region, and for the agricultural sector. And Mānuka establishment, they have the largest Mānuka stands in New Zealand, and quite a history in the Mānuka honey business. So Elands prides itself in designing and implementing environmental solutions which have successful commercial outcomes. And Tauranui.
Yes, so as Sheldon mentioned, one of the larger private landowners in the East Coast region with around 35,000 hectares of land under title. It is on that difficult country. It is mostly forested. Tauranui is owned by New Forests. They purchased Hickory Forest Farms around 22 months ago now, so been in a relatively short period of time. They manage on behalf of pension fund investors investments in the forestry around the globe. Around 1 million hectares under management at this point. They've got a very strong ethos and it's coming through quite rapidly with these sorts of agreements around doing the right thing, monetizing or at least attracting investors that are interested in applying capital long-term solutions for the environment, for the communities, for the people. So you'll see a bit of a change in the philosophy of how forests are valued from this ownership going forward. The Tauranui New Forest prides itself long-term sustainable management of forest resources, and we see the land we've got as being a mosaic of income and value streams, not a pine plantation forestry primarily. So a lot of what we're doing currently is looking at areas that we're planted to provide an erosion solution, but perhaps planted correctly, but perhaps shouldn't be harvested, or if replanted, should be replanted into something else, or retired into something that like this project with Elands. So that's really what we're doing a lot of work within our company to make sure that the right land use matching is occurring. It does need to be commercial, and there are more ways of getting commercial returns out of a forest than just selling logs, and society's increasingly proving that and giving us those opportunities. So we're really keen to engage in this project and look to hand over a reasonably significant area over time to this project. And it's not a silver bullet for preventing the logs traveling down streams and onto beaches. It's one part of the solution, and it won't happen overnight, but we think it will be one finger in the solution, sort of, or one arrow in the quiver of how we prevent those things happening in the very long term. So it's our involvement.
Thanks, Neil. And just a little bit about collaborations with community and future generations of mines. So we've had a strong collaboration on this project with Scion, which is New Zealand Forest Research Limited, and Rotorua. Scion have been there for many, many years, working on forests, but also native forests for the country. So Scion, I guess, tie Aratu and Elands, the project, the riparian project, to not only the science, which has been undertaken for many, many years, but to government initiatives that are occurring right at the moment. So Scion on this journey with us, and they will be providing support and ongoing study to make sure that we're doing the very best things up there in the riparians, etc., and monitoring that over time scientifically to see if there's anything we can be doing slightly better along the way. Government are behind that. We have been working with the people of Tolaga Bay, particularly Tauranui, Victor and others, so they're very aware of it. It ties in with their initiatives, ties in with their wishes, and there are quite a range of opportunities that will come out of this project where the local people can engage and take future employment and future revenue, future business that they can pick up on and do. That's actually encompassed within the KPIs that Elands has to perform to for the landowner, Aratu. And of course the Gisborne District Council. So I'd like to thank Councillor Seymour in particular, and Officer Kerry Hudson, who have really stuck with us on this project for quite some time now, and taken us through the journey of checking out resource consents, what we are and aren't allowed to do, and how this affects the district plan and all the rest of it. It's been a bit of a journey, I guess, Kerry, but we're there. It's happening, so thank you very much for the support from Council. Where to from here? So as I said, we're kicking it off this winter. This project will really make positive disruptive change to the forest industry. Provides a solution to mitigate environmental damage, as well as creating positive economic and social outcomes in the process. Once we've got this pilot planning successfully established, we will seek to roll this out nationally. Elands will. As the project develops, we'll update our website. It's mentioned there. You can grab copies of this if you want. And to celebrate the first planting, there'll be an open day, small community event on Thursday, the 24th of June, up and behind Tolaga Bay. So there's invites coming out to councillors on that. And just in closing, I'd like to say this is the beginning of a very long-term project. It'll survive numerous generations. It'll survive numerous rotations of production forest. And by its nature, it'll involve and inspire the communities who will generate sustainable futures from the project's long-term outcomes. Thank you.
Awesome. Questions, Your Worship?
Thank you for that, Sheldon, and thank you, Neil. Good seeing you again. Sheldon, quick question. I applaud what you're doing. It's fantastic. First step, like you say, in a very long-term plan, and you've been working on this for 2 years. Obviously, as a council, we would like every single forest owner and operator in our region to sign up to something like this. So my question to you is, in this journey that you've been on, have there been interest from other organisations or other forest industry seeing what you are doing and seeing the positive step you are taking? Because we would be interested to hopefully see everyone sign up. So have you had any interest there? And I'm sure after this is much more public, it might send the message to other organisations as well that look what we are doing, we're taking this seriously, we're looking at the long future. Like you say, it's not going to take a year or two. So have there been any interest from other organisations as well?
Yeah, thanks, Your Worship. I guess it's been really mixed interest. So some companies have been very interested in what we're doing, and we haven't promoted it wide scale just until we got all the pillars under the building. So we're getting to that point now, and I think from next winter, once we have this initial planting done and we've got things nailed down really well, we will certainly be trying to promote it not only through council but through central government and through industry association.
Fantastic, thank
But
you.
there has been some solid interest from the likes of Marlborough Sounds, Coromandel, some of the companies here. But I just add that it is a bit of a mentality change and, you know, somewhat disgraced, I will stand here quite honestly and say, I used to purchase farms for forest companies and clear the scrub and plant them. And I see it a totally different way now because, you know, I've been around long enough, as you see, to know what happens. But when you buy a farm like that, you plant every hectare you can in trees because that's how the numbers work. But it is not sustainable. We know that.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Councillor Biddy.
My compliments, congratulations to both companies. I've been here a long time and waited for something like this to happen. You expressing the issue of erosion on the coast. It's a major problem. And I don't quite know how we're going to fix it. This is one step in the right direction.
Question coming?
But I have, yes, one question to you. As I travel Highway 35, all that high country, that steep country that you talk about we shouldn't be replanting is currently being replanted. How do we stop that? Is that a council responsibility? Is it a company responsibility? Whose responsibility is it?
So I guess you don't want to kill the industry particularly, but it does take a bit of a push from the regulators. You have some rules in place now as regulators about what you can and can't plant pines on and harvest and build roads through. So maybe as time goes by, we manage that a little better. I totally hear you.
Councillor Worcester.
Yeah, thank you for your presentation. I find it really exciting. I think it's inspiring to see this kind of work going on, and I'm probably not alone and really looking forward to seeing how it lands. My question is just to understand, because I've got a primary sector background and a big limitation as to why we don't see more of this on farms as well, is because the upfront cost comes years and years ahead of any revenue that might be generated, whether it's from Mānuka or anything else. So how at this scale are you managing to balance that? And is there a limitation to how quickly it can be rolled out?
There's actually a lot of investors in the world that like to invest in this kind of project. So it's taken quite a long time to get the economics and the numbers of this robust. And particularly in terms of identifying risk in the investment, but rest assured there's a lot of companies out there, particularly emitters, who really want to invest in this type of green project. So investment, I'm not saying investment is not a problem, you never say that, but it's available.
Councillor Foster.
Yeah, great project, Sheldon. My question is, do you have to take on any liability of any consequences with this project that may happen, you know, environmentally? And, you know, are the forest owners, by you doing this for the forest owners, and if anything goes sour with an event and there's things, you know, the river and slash coming in, are you liable? Are you taking on part of the liability of the forest owners? Is it going to come back? Could something come back to bite you?
It's always stuff will bite you, but in that regard, Councillor, no. As I said, and as you'll appreciate, this is a very long-term thing. Like you're not going to actually have a solid barrier against slash there even within a decade. It takes Tauranui and Rimu probably at least 30 years to get to a reasonable sort of size to stop stuff. So we have a lot of KPIs that we have to perform to with Aratu Forests, taking over this land of theirs, but that's not actually one of them. They're just trying to do the right thing.
Councillor Faulkner.
Morning, guys. I've actually got a question for both of you. Sheldon, you give me faith that leopards can change their spots, eh? Wilding pines, pest control, all of those practicalities that are involved. Your investors are happy to cover the costs of those, given
Yes.
we're pretty stretched regionally on all of those things, and given our growing capacity around the place, I suspect wilding pines are going to be a biggie for you.
It's a significant zone for us because native species takes so much longer. It's roughly 6 times, if you're lucky, it's 6 times the cost of putting a pine tree on the ground and getting it away. So yeah, well aware of that, and we'll be working with Tauranui on that because we're sort of boundary one another all the way. So it's kind of a joint effort.
Yeah.
Right.
And I just had one other question for Tauranui, really. So you're going to donate your carbon credits for all this native land back to eLands again, are you?
ELAN's collect the carbon credits.
Yeah, good as gold. Excellent.
And any environmental credits been keeping objectives, that's all that sits with them as the forestry holder on these areas. So that's how they partly finance this.
And I'm guessing that upstream of these eLands plantings, you're going to look at maybe some mosaic harvesting, something along those lines to try and take the pressure off new plantings and new developments downstream.
We're doing, this is one element of change practice that Tauranui is implementing. There's engineering aspects, they're aware of the willingness to try and get slash nets into the thing, there'll be catchment level harvesting type things we're doing there. Some areas won't be harvested. So there's a mosaic of management things we're applying to this. Again, can't do them all today, but that is the trend of where we're going, is changing how it's been done because it didn't work.
Oh, thanks for that. That's been very enlightening.
Thank you for your support.
What's that time? 5 to 10. I'll go into one. Yeah. Okay, there's no extraordinary business, no notices of motion, and no adjourned business. So we're going to the first report, and that's the decision report on the speed rule consultation and NSLR program update. Just find it, page 16. Is that you, Dave? Yeah. And we've got Dave here for this.
So through the chair, Waka Kotahi are out consulting on their speed rule setting. So this is how we This is how we set speed limits across the whole of the country. So there are some generic things that Waka Kotahi has heard back from all of the road controlling authorities in the country. Biggest one obviously being around speed limits around schools. And as you'd be aware, we've had issues in the past where we tried to lower speed limits out at Muriwai School. I think we had objections to the lowering of that, which took a whole lot of time and effort, lawyers, those things. This plan change is to help speed up those type of rule changes going forward so that we don't have to enter into the bureaucracy and things with different lobby groups around. I think it's unanimous around making sure schools in particular are safe. The other part of it is looking about how speed management plans are set. And there's a new process that's got some tweaking in it that Waka Kotahi has outlined for the whole country, but then also have asked for some feedback about how they set their speed limits as well. So we have summarised the documents, and the documents haven't been attached because if you started to click on some of those links, you would have seen how many 100 pages were in those links. So we did provide the link there, but you'll see the feedback that we're looking to give back to Waka Kotahi. This paper, obviously time bound because of the changes that they're looking to make. Submissions have to be in by the 25th of June. So hence why this paper's come quickly to this committee so that you can help shape up our proposal in any way. So not sure if there's any questions or any other comments the committee would like us to make.
Thanks, Dave. There was a comment around the difference for a unitary authority and whether it was more onerous. You want to comment on that?
Through the committee, I think there's some provisions for us, but it's as our Regional Land Transport Committee has unitary, it has Waka Kotahi, and it has our community reps on it. That is the process for us to be able to enable how we're going to do our plan changes. We have gone back to Waka Kotahi on around how they do their speed management practices and how they will be setting those for the state highway. So we've asked for some changes around how they do the speed setting for the state highway, because they're the road controlling authority for those, and we've asked for greater representation so that we are able to be part of that process better for our regions going forward.
Your worship.
I had one question when I read this paper, and I did not click on a link which you just said because I have a paper copy, so it might be in that link. When I read this, I was thinking, does the man, everyday person in Gisborne really know this is happening? Because I have not heard, and I've just noticed that because I hear radio ads for our representation review or for different, you can't use a check at council anymore. So that message is being sent out. I was just wondering, and maybe I've just missed it because it's not like I hear everything. I hear nearly everything. I was just wondering, how are they consulting with our public so that we make sure we get the voice from everyday Gisborne Tauranui person in regards to this, because it will affect all our lives, and we want to make sure that message is wide, and the feedback is wide as well.
So Waka Kotahi have got a lot of their information online. They have they've been in touch with us directly around how we feed into. This is quite the rule setting and stuff for the whole of the country. So it's predominantly aimed at TLAs and road controlling authorities for how we feed into the rules. How we roll out those changes is something that we have to do through our regional transport committee, and that's where we would be consulting as part of our speed management plan and those things. They also have separate consultation running at the moment around the speed limits for State Highway 35 and how those are feeding in, but it's very much a Waka Kotahi national thing. It's not a...
So what you're saying is they are consulting us. Once the rules are set, we'll consult our community.
They're through the chair, your worship, they're consulting with the whole community right now. It's just being done at a national level.
Yeah, thank you.
So can you comment on page 22, item 21, where it says that the speed limit around schools target of 40% to be implemented by 30th of June 2024. That seems incredibly slow, and I'm not sure why it needs to be only 40%.
So through the chair, that's set for the whole of the country, that bar. For us here in Tauranui, we would hope to roll that out a lot quicker. It will, however, as the paper notes, require us to consult back with the Regional Transport Committee around the prioritisation for the works that we're doing around schools. So we have a budget set aside for works around schools. So we will have to go back, check that once this rule's in place, and just confirm that we're able to roll that out ourselves. But for some councils and road controlling authorities, that will be quite a big ask for them to roll that out, because it will actually mean some big spends as well.
Councillor Wilson.
Thank you. So I see sort of the submission kind of echoes some of these concerns, but I want to reiterate the concern that I have with another mandatory plan that needs to be done periodically, regardless of whether we perceive that actually things are fine, and what that does in terms of our resourcing, in terms of having another committee. Obviously, the government's not going to give us more money to have another committee. So, I understand that bylaws at the moment are problematic when you're trying to get something changed and the bureaucracy of having to jump through those loops. But while we might not want people challenging our ability to drop school bus routes around a school, for example, do we, how democratic is it for us to determine via a committee that, that, for example, everywhere is going to have an average, it's going to be based on average speeds. We know full well that people took a tour around the coast in a camper van going probably 30 kilometres below the speed that everybody else goes. I have some things that I'm supportive of in here, especially around the schools and things, but I also have some concerns about where this is going, and I think we possibly need to strengthen a little bit the extent to which we push back on some of this, because it will add more cost, it will add more work. You've highlighted in here that it's going to potentially come at a time where we're already under consultation pressure. We know our community is sick to death of consulting on everything. There must be a better way of getting the outcomes that are sought here without having to duplicate all this work. I support strengthening this, if anything.
Councillor Hughes?
Just further to Councillor Cranston's question, what exactly were we asking for in submission the 0.6? Are you just feeding back that it will require reprioritisation?
So through the chair for 0.6, so you're on page 20, is that right, Councillor Hughes?
Yeah, page 20.
So that's around the speed limits around schools. So with the provision of the 40% of those needing to be done by 2024, you've just set our long-term plan. So by the time this is approved by Waka Kotahi, we won't have the opportunity to come back through to advocate for more money through a long-term planning process.
So your feedback is that we
can't
access
ask
to
for more
resources.
money.
Yeah.
We've set the RLTP as well, so the Regional Land Transport Plan, it will have to come from within existing budgets, which means we're reprioritising the school safety initiative budget to be able to accommodate that.
And that'll be a common problem with councils all around, because a lot of them set long-term plans.
The RCAs have all commented your timing's rubbish.
I attended one of those meetings that they came to tell us what they intended doing. There were more Waka Kotahi staff there than there were locals. And as an observation, when they put those 80-kilometre signs along Highway 35, as I went home from council, I observed them being installed. When I came back the next morning, there was a speed wagon there with a camera in it. Is that your idea of enforcement and telling everyone that the rules are changing? But yeah, you know, I'm not averse to having speed reduced as long as it's going to get an effective outcome. And I didn't get that message.
Thank you. Yeah, we're going to move here for approval of the draft to go ahead. We did have a recommendation from Councillor Worsnop that she'd like to see it strengthened, but apart from that, second, Councillor Badet. All those in favour? Against? Carried. What have we got? We'll go one more, eh? Update on the implementation of the Trade and Industrial Stormwater Management Rule, page 24. Sorry? And we've got Kate Sykes here from Environmental Risks and Monitoring Compliance Team Leader. Welcome, Kate.
Thank you. This item has actually been placed under the infrastructure services part of the meeting. It should actually be under the environmental services and protection. But really it was just an update for the members on the implementation of the new rule that came into effect middle of 2019. Yeah, thank you. And it's basically trying to achieve the outcomes of the freshwater plan to improve freshwater quality. We've found one of our biggest issues has been sediment control for businesses and trade premises. There has been challenges about getting people to understand the impact of sediment and view it as a contaminant. We all accept that hydrocarbons and oils and fats and detergents are contaminants, but also sediment is one. So it has been a work in progress. Some businesses face some quite significant cost inputs to put in place some controls around their discharges, but we've agreed on a graduated program to compliance over 5 years, provided that they've given us some plans that can show how they will get there in the end. Any questions?
Oh, thank you. Any questions from the councillors? Councillor Worsnop.
Yeah, I just want to say well done. It's well thought out. I do know that it's a year or so late. So we've essentially put the rule in place, and then after the rule's in place, we've gone and kind of mopped up all the people that should be complying with the rule. And this is probably not so much for you, but for us as a table, we're about to do that with farm environment plans. 31st of May this year, everyone's supposed to, who's captured by that rule, we're supposed to have a farm environment plan. This same process needs to be repeated with farm environment plans, ideally not a year post when everyone's supposed to have had one submitted, but the process that you've used in terms of, the difference is going to be quite dramatic between a small, changes needed versus large changes needed. I think you've taken a really well-balanced approach, and I commend you for that. Whoever is in charge of environmental services and protection, can this please be repeated for farm environment plans? Thank you.
Councillor Hughes.
Two questions. First is, what's the feedback been from the businesses with, I guess, taking a proactive approach?
I guess it's depended on their level of tools that they have to put in place. Initially, there was quite a lot of resistance, but we've used an educative approach, and the workshops were fabulous. I've had one staff member dedicated to this, and she's done an amazing job. I think when they realise that they're not actually going to get, the big stick thrown at them, and that, we're recognising there are costs to businesses, and business is crucial to our district, they've gradually been brought on board. And, a lot of the issues can be solved with better housekeeping, I guess, on site. But it is a dual responsibility both between the landowner and the site and business owners. So we're asking them to work together.
Yeah, and I think the second question, just on point 29 about the 5-year timeframe with significant expenditure, what's the threshold for that significant expenditure?
It's cost really, and a lot of it is around the treatment device that they're required to install. And basically,
a number like
it can range into tens of thousands, for some of those sites, particularly if they've got large areas to seal, in terms of the contaminants that they're needing to address. And I guess if they can show us that they're moving towards that, that's a negotiated kind of decision, I think, which we would take to our director, for approval.
But I guess, the other side of it, breaches in that 5-year time frame, you'll still have thresholds for that, I'm assuming?
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right, thanks for that, Kate. The report's just a note in report, so move it to note. Thank you, Your Worship. Seconded, Councillor Hughes. Nothing further. All those in favour? Against? Carried. This presentation, I think it's a long one. No? Yep, okay, so page 30, we've got a presentation. I'm going for the record of actually having morning tea when it says on my agenda.
Thank you, Chair. So what we just want to do as part of this is update you to where we're at with the Three Waters Improvement Program. So just by way of history for this was the funding that was given early this year, around the $11.04 million to council in support for our Three Waters initiatives that we have underway, but then also as part of our commitment to the Three Waters reform process that is underway at the moment. And I won't go into the Three Waters reform package today because that's another conversation. So the biggest pressure on this is at the bottom there, which is around our time frame of 30 March 2022, the spend rolling out by. So we very much are aware of that as staff and are working hard to make sure we do that. So just to quickly recap, we have got $500,000 towards a safe water supply for Ruatoria. We've got 2.785 million towards taking our water reticulation out to Mediwai Township, so extending the pipeline, and that's the supply pipeline from Wainaki out to them. And then you put $7.5 million towards the wastewater treatment plant. So just an overview of each of those projects and where they're at, just for your awareness. So why have they put that so small? This is the main drivers for why we put that through, and you're aware of these. So it's around health is the biggest driver for it. It's around making sure that our community have got clean, healthy drinking water, that they have a safe supply that they're able to tap into, and to be able to unlock the economic potential for some areas that's needed, but then also making sure that wherever we're taking our water from, that it's coming from an environment that's able to be able to do that. So those two projects at Mediwai and Ruatoria are the highest priority for us to roll those ones out for those rural communities. They tick all of those boxes from the Three Waters program. So the picture up there behind me is the current Ruatoria supply. That's the spring that comes from there. And we have had issues with this supply for years. So there's a couple of issues with it. The first one is you'll be aware this year that spring ran dry and the community were no longer able to take from it. So the water, registered water supply up there wasn't able to take out of the spring, it was too low. The other big issue we have is also during winter, and it's around the security of that spring. So that spring is really nice, clean water. It comes up from underground. However, it's quite close to the Waipu River. So unfortunately, it means that it can overtop and has overtopped a number of times in the past where the Waipu River will flood over into that as well. It also has had some issues in the past around stock and other things there. So not the greatest of options. It's also something that we have quickly discounted as staff when it comes to formalising that supply going into the future as the main water supply for Ruatoria because of those two issues. One, running dry, secondly, overtopping in winter. So it's not going to be our solution going forward. So as we said, the spring dried up and unfortunately it meant whānau up the coast were taking directly out of either the Waipu River or further up one of the tributaries that are in there. Those rivers, when they're in low flow, are not suitable for drinking water. It's not great water at all. So what we're talking about with Ruatoria has been around a standalone treatment supply for a top-up point for the community. So at the moment, we are discussing and we're looking at a number of different sites for a groundwater extraction. So a bore going down into the aquifer underneath the Waipu. So there is a big water supply underneath the Waipu River. We're doing some quality testing and making sure that we have water that we need in the quantity and the quality that we're after. But what we've done is put up you can see that's Whara Tutu in the background there. And it's a collection point for the community. So it's a quick top-up point. So my engineers will hate me for talking like this. We'll drill down, tap into the water, we'll bring that up into supply tanks that will be sitting up there. What we're roughly looking for is a water supply that people could pull up with an IBC, for example, 1,000 litres, and it fill within minutes, but then also have a cartridge supply point for people to be able to tap into for the water carriers as well. So we would be treating on site. It could be done remotely. It's not something that has a high compliance cost with it, but it would mean that there would be a safe water supply for that community all year round for people to go and top up from, and would manage it from there. So we've been working with the Runanganui because of the joint management agreement, of course, and it's with the Runanganui around whereabouts it is going to be located. They have some land there, council has some land there, there's some private landowners as well. So working through which one of those is the best one to go to. For example, we explored Whakarua Park. They have a bore there at the moment. It's not a suitable location for us, just when it comes to traffic access, but then also the volume of water that we would be looking to take out of there. So going through those potential water supplies and working on the cultural impact assessment for that water supply as it's coming out of the Waipu as well. So Waipu, of course, our joint management agreement means that it comes under the JMA because it'll be a substantial water take out of the Waipu River. So we've partnered with the Runanganui going forward to make sure that when we get to that JMA process that we have taken those considerations into our consent as we go through with it. So that's Ruatoria. Are there any questions on this? Sorry, I know I've glossed over it. Your Worship.
So when you talk about sucking out water, 1,000 litres, is that intended for the public to use, or will there be someone that operate that and people can collect water, or can someone just rock up and get the water for themselves?
It's a good question, Worship. So we want to have both of those available. So there'll be two supplies, one for the community to be able to come up to top up containers to be able, and when we say containers, it's normally 1,000 litre IBC, those big cubes that you see. So those would be something for a community if they want to come to top up from, absolutely fine, there'll be provision for that. So think of a driveway for them. On the other side of it will be for commercial tankers. So it would be formalising for the registered water carriers for them to be able to top up fast from. So for them to be able to, similar to what we have out at the Waipawa treatment plant there for water for commercial carriers to be able to go and operate from. But we're not entering into the commercial carrier status.
And then just supplementary, I assume the water is free.
For the community, yes.
But for the commercial carriers?
We'll be paying. It'll be for the cost of transport and for the water. So we will be charging for the water. There'll be costs that will come with that water. We need to work through what the costs are going to look like for that community and also for the ongoing cost of that. So for both Muriwai and Ruatoria, we are going to bring a paper to you around the operational costs for how these things are going to be rated for going forward.
So we've got 505,000 for Ruatoria. How many people are expected to benefit from that supply?
So the Ruatoria supply at the moment would definitely be servicing as far up as Te Araroa. I know that there are whānau that go down as far as Ruatoria for supply now. So it would be for the water supply carriers, Ruatoria is the most central point for them to go from. They'll be able to service down towards Tikita, Tokomaru Bay if they need to down there if their supply goes, but then also upwards Te Araroa, Wharikahika as well.
Thank you. And then 2.785 million for Muriwai. How many people is that expected to benefit?
I don't know the population Muriwai off the top of my head, sorry, Councillor.
I'm just making the analogy of the, at the end of the day, it's government funding for our townships or for extending the water supply. And I just wonder whether, I haven't quite finished, whether 505,000 dedicated to the coast one was sufficient.
Nadine.
I think if I may, through the chair, this particular one isn't around a numbers game. It's more around a treaty partnership relationship obligation that the council has had in Ngāi Tauranui who have been stewardships. Yeah.
I get that. At the end of the day, it's government money and they need to make it available for our public. Thank you.
On Ruatoria, because we're going to go into Muriwai.
You mentioned that it's likely to be bore water. Why the need to treat it? Is the aquifer not clean water?
Through your worship, sorry, just promoted you then, Chair. Through the chair, for us to provide water, we have to comply with the drinking water standards for New Zealand. We have to make sure that water is treated, a la Havelock North. So for us around security of supply, making sure that we know that we can pass it, we have to show that we've treated it, we have tested it before we're able to give that to the community. It's the standards that we have to do as a registered drinking water supplier. So the Muriwai Township.
Bill might have something on Ruatoria.
No, we're not articulating your house.
What you said, the Whakarua supply has met all the health requirements in terms of tests. It's been there since the health department approved. That's where water supply system was to go when we put it in. Park water, I'm talking about. Currently, it more than meets the requirements, but I guess Councillor Wirumu, who is in charge of this project, has explored. I'm just concerned when I look up here, Runanga, Hapu, Iwi, who.
So through the chair, we've been working with a number of parties. So I can go through the individuals with you. Coffee if you like.
That's all right.
Councillor Vidit.
I just concern myself that there is a community organisation that is involved with the wider community too. They should be part of this.
So through the chair, the Muriwai Township upgrade. So this is something, as the Chief Executive just talked about, has been a long held aspiration for Ngāi Tamanahiri. So it's around how we connect them to their water that we use up at Wainaki. So how we're connecting them back into that. And as part of it, I'll quickly flick to this page that we have here because it gives kind of a better overview for me to talk to. So there are two different ways that we can come into Muriwai to bring water. So we're going to tap into the main Wainaki trunk line. And the easiest place to do that is at Manatuki. And then bring it down the state highway is one option that we have there. We have a booster station that looks after Manatuki now. So a pump station that keeps it off to the side. There is, however, another option that we have started to look at as staff, and it may make a bit of sense. I might just point it out to you. This is Dunstan Road, the back through here, railway bridge coming across. So we have water out to here now, so that's on the town water supply now. There is an option to bring it across the railway line and down into Muriwai, which is a lot shorter. So just for the benefit of the viewers at home, we're talking about the end of Dunstan Road and then coming across the railway line to bring it in from Muriwai Township there. There's a couple of different reasons for that, and it's one of them is around optimizing pressure within the Manatuki system. So when we have a really big drawdown here in town during summer production, we struggle to keep water pressure up at Manatuki. So for those homeowners there, they do struggle. The water's not as fast as it should be effectively, but I mean, it's a trickle at some times. So it's an issue for the operations team. It's also a lot shorter pull from Dunstan Road through to Muriwai. These are options that we need to talk through with the Muriwai community because they have different effects. Obviously, if we come over the railway line, we miss a lot of the homeowners that live along the state highway. They won't be getting picked up by this. So it'll be a lot shorter, sharper reason to hit Muriwai, but we will miss people who are not currently connected between Manatuki and Muriwai. It'll be difficult to take it back round to them. So the team are just looking through how this will actually will roll out, and we want to talk with the community out there about how this is going to be done as well. So for Muriwai, what's proposed is to connect them up to a top-up supply. So this is only a tank top-up supply. It is not mains pressure. It is something that's for their tanks. When they run low, they get topped up. Similar to what happens at Wharatutu at the moment. When the tanks drop down, this will then automatically replenish the tanks for them. So it's not mains pressure, just to make sure that people are aware of that. So we have been out and had a look at a feasibility for how we would roll out through there. The elevations rolling through, as you can see, it's never as flat as what you think with the eye as you roll out if you follow the state highway through there. So how we will get it out, we have appointed our project manager for both of these projects, Ruatoria and for Muriwai, and are looking at the design for it at the moment. So we're running through the preliminary engineering design of how we would roll it out. So there are some different methodologies that we need to work through with the community, and we'll report back to yourselves as well as to exactly how we're going to roll it out. By that, I mean there are options around what size pipe, which affects feed and a lot of those things as well. Are there any questions on Muriwai before I go further forward with it? Worship?
When you say you are supplying water as a tank, backup tank full up, are you saying that the water pipe or the access to the water pipe will go to each household and also the school then, because that's what I would ask next, because it's not in the village, or is it like Ruatoria where there's a central point and people then have to top up their tanks from there?
So through the chair, as it's currently proposed, we will run the pipe past people's houses and put a Toby for them to connect into. So it will be at their cost to connect it from the road out into their tank.
What does it cost a household to connect to a pipeline, roughly?
It can be anywhere from $1,800 upwards, depending if you have to go past driveways, if you have to get it to the back, the length and all of those kind of things. So it can be $1,800 to $3,000 upwards, depending on what that looks like. We have had early consultation with Ngāi Taumani community members, and some have asked around a top-up supply for the marae and the school, and then a community top-up point. So one of the big issues for a number of the communities that are looking at water reticulation at the moment is that if they have water that goes past their houses, they then have to pay the water rate, which is substantial for some of those communities. So it's $320 per household would be added to their rates. For some members of our community, that's prohibitive. So we are looking at different ways to roll that out, and then looking at the affordability and then also the cost of that rate. I do know there's a paper coming to the next operations meeting in August to discuss the Paritahi water supply. So for example, Paritahi has been given money by the Ministry of Health to formalise the water supply that they have out there and to connect into the Wainaki supply. So it's been around for a very long time. It's Ministry of Health want to get this project underway. The community are concerned about the cost of that $320 per household for a top-up supply. It's not mains precious, but that paper is coming to discuss those prices at a further committee meeting.
Thank you.
I think the community does need to have some clarity about what that connection might be, because I've connected water to 3 houses now, and if I could get it for 3,000, I'd be absolutely over the moon. And a lot of those driveways are quite long out at Muriwai, so I think it's going to be well north of 3,000. I think they may not be aware of that. So, Councillor Seymour.
Thank you. I just wanted to back up on conversations that have been had, and I think it was Manawa Kai, way back when we were doing the water plan, we actually went to Deverai, where they had 5 tanks that they'd installed at that time, and they too were near the water supply. So is that, would they be picked up then, in what Mr. Wilson just said with regard to the Paratai water supply?
Through the chair, I'll bring another paper to you around the Paratahi water supply and the issues that are there around the boundaries. It's an MOH project that we're involved with them teeing up because it'll transfer ownership to ourselves, but there's papers to come to yourselves in consultation with the community around the extent, the location, a number of things that are as part of that project, but it's just something I've highlighted because the cost, the operational costs are something that all communities are worried about when they get their supplies.
And supplementary, that's exactly the same as what the Whakatutu and Tigaraga water supply, that years ago council recognised they needed to be assisted in the payment of it, because well, it was all very well to have it, but in actual fact, to meet modern standards, the rates were prohibitive on the individual homeowners.
And that 320 is subsidised already. So the actual cost of Whakatutu and Tigaraga is well north of that 300. It's because it's spread across all water rates as equal. So it is a disproportionate cost for some of those communities if they had to shoulder the whole cost of it.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson. So just thinking in terms of, you made mention of a pipeline running past homes, etc., on its way to Middleway Village itself. There's also some fairly large businesses out there, horticultural businesses. What certainty or assurance does the Tauranui community have of supply, given that we run dry in the summer out our way quite regularly?
So through the chair, this is around homes connecting up to it. One of the things that we've been clear on is this is not for irrigation, this is town water supply for drinking. If anybody was wanting to do something further out there, then we're more than happy to talk to them about the logistics of that and the cost that would be involved. However, this is coming from Wainaki, where the community are aware that we have to make sure we've got enough supply up there now. We run Waipawa, it's working. However, a big commercial supply would need to talk to us quite quickly around how that water was going to be supplied to them. This is a tank top-up supply, so it's not anywhere near the sort of pressure that we would have in our normal ring mains. This is a much lower supply.
Councillor Foster.
Just my question was about Waipawa. When we switch over into the Waipawa water supply over summer, how would does that affect Manatoki or Murawai, or are they still on Wainaki the whole time?
Through the chair, when we run Waipawa, we are still running Wainaki at the same time. What we do is we turn down the pressure from Wainaki, so it's not, we don't run purely off Waipawa unless we have a big break in the line somewhere, which is when we're able to do it. So there's always a feed coming in from Wainaki. It's just that it's a much lesser feed than what we would normally have because we've augmented from Waipawa instead.
All right, thanks for that. It's just a noting report. So moved by Councillor Burdett, second by Councillor Sheldrake. All those in favour? Against? Carried. Cup of tea. Yeah, damn. 2 minutes.
They've obviously done a lot of work. I only have a couple of issues. I mean, driving on the beach, be it motor vehicles, motorbikes, whatever, it's been a way of life on the coast for many, many years. This problem is not unique to Makarori. What's been suggested here might alleviate some of the issues, but I wouldn't want to see this become general policy across all the beaches on the coast, and people go for a number of reasons, mainly to get kaimoana. I've got no problem with this report. I think it's a very good one, and it might deal with the Makarori, well, partly deal with the Makarori problem. So that's my view on this. All I wanted to ask Ed is, how bad really is the problem? We've heard those people that came in here, and you have to accept that they're quite genuinely complaining on a number of issues. Yeah, how bad is it?
How bad is the problem, Ed?
Having been out there on site visits several times, it is bad. There are a lot of unofficial accesses through that dune system, and they do need to be pulled back and limited in terms of vehicle access onto the dune system. So,
thank you, Councillor Seymour.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I'm happy to move the recommendations. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm happy to move the recommendations.
Thank you.
And in doing so, I just want to remind councillors, because I'm sure you've heard me on it before, while this notes a deputation to council, the discussions actually with GDC and the Mayor came to the meeting, NZTA came to the meeting, began right back in July, long before we had the deputation in here. And it would have happened sooner if it weren't that COVID intervened and the community weren't able to meet. The whole of the community at Makarori and others are really supportive of some action being taken by Gisborne District Council to protect the dunes. They are getting further and further degraded. And to Mr. Councillor Burdett's point, this is actually not at this moment precluding vehicles from the beach, albeit that is something that they seek. It is actually suggesting a reduction in speed limit, but that won't happen immediately either. So, but the issue I have with this around the bollards is and I'm not suggesting GDC pay for them, we're only talking about bollarding at the moment one section of the beach, which would seem to me, from my experience of looking at the beach and seeing it nearly daily, that it's going to push the traffic to the other sections that are not bollarded. I called the Busby family last night, who own some of the beach, and I think that I would like to see us actually get the costings to do a proper complete job of the bollarding with respect to the Ferris whānau at there and what they're happy with as well. The whole package be costed and funds sought for the package to be completed, because we'll only just push the damage from one point to another. Now, I'm not suggesting for a moment that ratepayers fund it, and I see it suggesting here that it's 125,000 for the council-owned part of the beach, but I just make the point, we put money into other areas where we want to do protection for a variety of things. My pet hobby horse is Palmore. So we're not putting a huge amount of money into this, but I do think we should go out there looking for third-party funding like we do for Palmore and other projects, because it is a pristine part of our beach. We don't want people fenced off from using it. We want defined areas so that can be controlled. And the dunes continue to be protected, because it notes in the paper that they are low and they're getting further degraded, and they're going to become more and more vulnerable, and then the road will become vulnerable. So I think it's a great project, and well done to council officers for getting it to this stage. I'm happy to move it.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I did have a concern about the, on page 37, it's got recommendations, staff recommend proceeding with this option as phase 1 and supporting further discussions with the adjoining landowners. So, I mean, it is something that does need to go hand in hand. And I'd just like to have confidence that the discussions with the landowners and other stakeholders at this stage are in line with where we are at it. So if you give us that confidence.
Yep, through the chair, I'm sorry. Through the chair, we have already started conversations with the landowners and with also including Civil Assist, the consultants that we brought on board to help through this process. And we're going to make sure that we continue with communications with them at all times as well throughout the process.
Mr. Chairman, can I get an answer whether it can be priced up for the whole job so that where third party or even philanthropic trusts come to light with some money, well, it's always cheaper if the whole job is done at once, or most of it.
Through you, the chair. So Councillor Seymour, you're right. We have had several meetings with the community, which started right back in July, and they've been really clear around what their aspirations are. We're able to proceed with the bollarding of the council reserve section. That's very straightforward. We didn't want to necessarily wait for the outcome of a reserve management plan process to be told that that's what we wanted to do. As far as working with private landowners, we have two that adjoin the middle section of the GDC reserve area. We are working with them. We were hesitant to put in a report here that we would price up bollards for their section of the land without having further conversations to enable us to provide that confidence and support. But should they have provide that steer, we would be able to do that for them. It's not a difficult process, but we're also very conscious that their main adjoining landowner is actually Waka Kotahi, so we would expect some conversations to be happening at that level, and we are very happy to facilitate and enable that to happen. But I wouldn't want to set an expectation that GDC might be coming to the party to pay for that work.
Thank you very much.
I'd just like to protest on behalf of my tribe. The submissions and that we've had in front of us have said the problems are motorbikes, vehicles full of motorbikes, divers, joyriders, fishermen and general oinks. On page 34, factors possibly contributing to dune deterioration accelerating are B, technological advances in wetsuits leading to increased winter surfing, therefore increased winter vehicle access when the dunes are damp and more vulnerable to damage. There's no evidence that it's surfers. Why are we, none of these other people are identified in there except my tribe. Oh, Councillor Foster.
Yeah, just to add to that, technological advances in wetsuits, I don't think that actually has caused the damage. I mean, back in the day, before the technological advances in wetsuits, we were still there surfing hard, and I think it's just because surfing's become so popular and the numbers have increased. But yeah, just with this paper, I mean, you know, for me, we've looked at this area for a long, long time. There's a minority group that are causing the major problems, you know, bikes in particular. And the speed limit on the beach. But, you know, there's 3 national surf breaks of national significance at that beach. So, you know, we have the ideal opportunity to turn this into a surfing reserve. And by doing so, you would be able to, I would imagine, access some exterior money for that cause, because it will be the first in New Zealand. And we have the perfect opportunity with the beach of its proximity and everything to be designated as a surfing area, which would include environmental protection and all the other things that could come with that. You know, so we could be leaders in this area and try and promote a designated surfing reserve area with all the environmental protection, everything to it, and really enhance this beach and protect it in a better way. You know, so we've been talking about this for a long time, so it would be really good to be able to pursue this and see if we could be a leader in the country and have the first.
Is that Councillor Shelter?
Thank you. I just think, you know, it also needs to go hand in hand with the enforcement once this thing is done. And I look at page 39, if the vehicle is moving at the time of offending, only New Zealand Police can undertake enforcement. Like, you know, is there going to be any teeth from council if people offend after bollards are in and signage, etc.?
Sorry, I'm looking at, through you, Chair, I'm looking at Ms Montgomery there.
So it would depend on bylaws and things like that, but in terms of speeding vehicles, very much New Zealand Police.
Sorry, supplementary, just to finish that off. So pretty much it's going to be very difficult to manage if a vehicle gets on the beach screaming around. If you're relying on the New Zealand Police, no offence to them, but they're probably not going to be there.
If I can make a quick comment on that, I guess the secret to enforcement is actually identification. And when you look on the table on page 34, There's been very few RFSs come through, so that really doesn't give us the legs for enforcement because they're not being identified at the time of the crime, if you like. Councillor Westnall.
That fits in pretty well with what I was going to say. 20 kilometres an hour, if you're sitting there with a phone and you're videoing someone on the beach doing something you don't think they should be doing, it's going to be pretty hard for the police to go, they're going over 20. You know, why is it not 10? It's pretty obvious if someone's not going slow, you know, if it's really slow that they're supposed to be going. It's difficult once you're starting to get into sort of that indeterminate area. Perhaps our speed should be something that is, you know, where somebody using their phone, getting a number plate, can hand that on and report it, and the police can, from that footage, fairly easily say, well, they're clearly not doing 10 kilometres an hour. You know, I just wondered if 20 is too high to make it easy for the police, because if it's not enforced, it's pointless having it.
Might be an opportunity for someone to develop a speed radar app on their phones. Councillor Faulkner.
Thank you. Encouraging people to do the right thing sometimes involves providing the facilities for them to do so. And I'm thinking here in terms of toilets, preferably that don't cost $1 million each, and rubbish collection. Signage needs to be a big part of that too. Yeah, what options have we got there to just make it easier to do the right thing? I've read through the submission here. And I suspect this one's brilliant.
Through you, the chair. So the approach, it talks about options in the paper, but basically the multi-prong approach. So really it's around working with the community, identifying, and there are some low-hanging fruit that we realise, like littering, etc. It's not appropriate, never is. And we can respond with bins in the right place and the size of bins that are required. But actually what we find is that the people that are tipping. It's a different type of issue. But this multi-prong approach and using the reserve management plan and having input from the wider community as well as the local residents, it sets a tone around how we value makarori and what we expect to see through appropriate use and everything else. And it encourages people to, I guess, monitor and do that kind of enforcement almost themselves, you know. So it's self-monitoring to an extent, but there is a lot that we need to work through, and fly tipping and appropriate signage, restoration planting, all those things will go hand in hand.
I guess my question flows over into protection of our other coastal areas where we're seeing more and more pressure, Muriwai being a classic case of that. So, yeah.
Look, yeah, Councillor Foster.
What I would suggest would be a great stakeholder would be the Gisborne Board Riders Club to to work alongside, because at the end of the day they represent the bulk of the surfers who are probably the biggest users of that area as well, and they would be looking at seeing all the different activities, good or bad, that are happening out there. So and for the access ways, the proper access ways, there's certain breaks right along Makarori that are really popular, and to close off some of those would be detrimental, I think, because before you start closing off entrance ways, I would have a great conversation with the Board Riders Club to find out which are the breaks that are most frequently used, because they'll find other ways of getting in there which would be detrimental to the environment if some areas were closed off.
So looking at the recommendations, I'm just wondering whether it should be changed to be just around that reserve management plan, because all the rest of the recommendation is around the installation of bollards, and they're still wanting to price that whole issue out, and there's the further consultation with the stakeholders and whether we want to improve that element of the job at this stage or not. I'm not sure. Perhaps put that back to the committee. Councillor Seaman.
Mr. Chairman, I mean, I think it's good to leave the reserve management in because it just talks about the development of, and it's not going to be immediate.
Mm.
And if it is my right, can I ask?
Well, do you want to use it now? Or?
Yeah, well,
Is anyone else?
Have other debate. That's what I need to know.
If you want to use it as your right of reply, I'd like to take Councillor Hughes first.
Go for it.
Yeah, thank you.
Have the petitioners been communicated with about the bollards? Like, do they see that as a sufficient solution? Because it just seems like the bollards will solve the dune access potentially, but as Councillor Foster's indicated, if the brakes are there, they can access the beach and other areas and park up on the dunes, then it might not solve that issue potentially. So whether it's having those designated areas with adequate signage could solve the solution, could be the solution.
Through you, the chair. So this report is indicating our intent to use bollards, and in partnership with Waka Kotahi, who will level areas where there are driveway access before we put bollards in. This is indicating an approach, and we are still to use the design phase to work with others, such as the board riders, to make sure that where we do provide enclaves for vehicles to park and be controlled, if you like, within the dune environment, to access where they need and want to go to make the most of that process. You're right, it won't close off the whole dune system. It would still potentially be accessible from the beach. We're only looking at the state highway side, but it's a package of work and a packaged approach, and it would certainly be a major deterrent to the types of use that you see there at the moment.
Just for the first part of the question, had the petitioners been advised that the bollards were going to be the solution?
Yeah.
Yes. So just to clarify through the chair, the main driver of the works that we're talking about is to curb some of the behaviours down there where we're having issues. It's not to block surfers off from locations. It's around four-wheel drive off-road enthusiasts, shall we call them, who have decided to turn Makadori Beach into their playground driving through the dunes. It's to curb those kind of things and also to help with the issue of fly tipping. So litter, rubbish bins, there's toilets at either end of the beach now, there's rubbish bins at either end of the beach. We're not proposing to put anything further in. The bollards are predominantly to get people off the dunes because, I mean, Councillor Foster and Councillor Cranston have been surfing it a lot longer than anyone else in this room. You'd know there's a whole lot more access tracks down there than needs to be at the moment. They're not to the main surf breaks anymore. They're well defined. We all know where they are. This is the new ones that are coming in and are getting rutted out deliberately that we're trying to protect the dunes and those antisocial behaviours after dark.
Thank you. Oh, hello. Councillor Robinson. Sorry. Oh, Anne. Don't fight over it.
So we talk about option 6 is about education, because that is probably for me one of the most important bits, but then there's no cost associated with education and awareness campaign. Then we move on to page 40 where we talk about the first phase, which would be the bollards and slowly developing the reserve management plan, speed limit. But then in our recommendations, there is no note of signage and education campaigns. So is that to come and there'll be a recommendation later, or is it just an omission at the recommendations?
Through you, the chair. So we have a signage budget available and we have been rolling out new signage. We will continue to do that. The reserve management plan will inform how we go about things. So we would probably do some minimal signage at this point at those key access points and then continue with the full comms campaign. So that's a multi-hub approach to management at Makarori. Some will fall in the comms team, those costs, but there is business as usual budgets available for that work.
And that will happen even though it's not a recommendation that we are passing today. So we don't have to check on that. It is part of a work plan somewhere.
Correct. At an operational level, we will
Thank
be
you.
continuing to do that work.
Thank you, Councillor Robinson.
Thank you, and apologies everyone, I had to step out for an important call, which was technically difficult. I apologise too if I'm going to raise a point on this issue which has been raised before. Having read the paper, my note was I would like us to try education signs identifying approved beach access points before spending $90,000 on bollards. I would have thought you could achieve that goal, certainly trial achieving the same goal of identifying the newly rutted and the ones we want people not to use by simply putting signs and maybe some sort of blockage across it. It doesn't have to be permanent particularly, but then saying on those signs, look, 150 metres that way is a legitimate entrance, 75 metres that way is a legitimate entrance, and do that along the beach and put signage, and there's a budget there, $8,000 for signage around why we need to protect the dunes, and just see whether that can achieve some of these outcomes before we spend $90,000 bollarting the whole beachfront. And of course, with private land along there, there's challenges. You won't necessarily be able to block off and achieve what we want to achieve. I'd love us to try the education pathway first.
Okay, so that's contrary to the recommendation. Councillor Seymour's right to reply.
Yes, thank you very much. Oh, welcome. Councillor Robinson's contribution as he's just joined the room, but if he's been up and down the coast recently, he would have seen that the degradation has got considerably worse and signs are removed. There was a sign for years put up by a former council officer 20 years ago over a hump that was used for practice jumps. And I think that we've arrived at a very good solution through a lot of discussion with the Makarori community and others who are landowners who don't necessarily live at Makarori. So there's been a lot of input into this. And again, history reminds us that the bollards along Wainui actually arrived for the very same reason, to stop people choosing to drive from the roadside onto the dunes probably 15 years ago. So education and signage is a grand tool, but regrettably, it will not have the impact that is needed to protect the dunes. Council has an obligation to protect our environment and to protect our beachfront. Now, I just want to say, and in support of Councillor Foster's comment, I've heard of a surfing reserve raised in here lots of times, but regrettably, nobody thought to raise it as a matter in our 10-year plan, even if it didn't have money beside it. So maybe someone needs to write a report so it can be picked up, because it is a fabulous beach and it's a fabulous place for young people to learn to surf. The surf's, you know, relatively small at times, and we can have surf schools out there. Nobody wants any of that to stop. They just want to stop the degradation done by a few hoons in vehicles who last winter made the ruts hugely deep that didn't even exist the winter before. And while Councillor Foster's flagged alarm about a number of the entranceways being closed off, there are 14 new ones along that beachfront, and they weren't there a couple of years ago. They're being continually remade. So we have an obligation to protect that for June, and I think staff have done a really good job getting to where you've got to. I urge people to vote for the recommendations.
Thank you. And did we have a seconder?
We have
Terry. Yeah. All right, all those in favour? Against? Carried. Page 51, Palmerston Road, proposed tree removal. Moved by Councillor Faulkner. Second by Councillor Hughes. Nothing to add, Led. Take as read. Okay, taking it as read. Councillor Reynolds, Gregory.
Thank you. Thank you for this report. In it, it speaks about the seeds that fall and have a skidding falling incidents. Is that must be just at a certain time of the year? And for how long is that?
Through the chair, it's actually longer than you would think. So I always suspected that it was only over a few months of the winter period, and actually since the complaints have been coming in, I've been watching and seeing when the flowers and seeds fall. It's actually more like from March to August at varying degrees. So at the moment it's not at its most prolific, but in the next couple of months it is pretty heavy, and at the moment it is still an issue.
Supplementary, around the corner, when I first saw the report, I thought that the blind vision people who are in Grey Street were having all their prayers answered, because they've had a few complaints about a tree outside, but it's not one of these melias, I think it's a chestnut, and issues with that. Is there any plans to go around the corner with that?
Through the chair, no, currently we are only focusing on the ones on Palmerston and up, turning up towards into the city on Grey Street.
Thank you. Nothing further. Okay, trees are going. Going.
I think quickly, I mean, as a member of the Gisborne City Highland Pipe Band, we have tripped and fallen down those streets on a fairly regular basis. And one thing I was going to say, because of the work done immediately outside our band rooms on Palmerston Road there, the ornamental pear trees make a really nice alternative. So whilst many in our community would like to protect any and all trees, I think the alternative options of the pear trees is different. Thank you.
Yeah, the difference we've got here is we haven't got a large group protesting this, so I think there's quite a wide acceptance. Okay, so moved by, where'd we go on that one? Councillor Faulkner, and second by Councillor Faulkner and Hughes. Yep, thank you. All those in favour? Against, carried. Page 70, the Regional Pest Management Plan. And I see Phil and Kerry up there, raring to go. Okay, take as read, or you got something to add? Yeah, okay, we'll take as read. Any, Councillor Faulkner. Okay, thank you.
So with that said, it probably doesn't go nearly as far as many of us in the farming community and probably forest communities would like. And I guess my one question to Kerry and his team is if we were able to excite more funding, be it through grants or indeed through the Natural Heritage Fund and the likes, do you have the human resources to go further and faster with this?
No, we would need to recruit staff to do that. Yes, so yes, we've got our head above water at the moment. We've been through recruitment. The one of the larger points of going through that recruitment was to have succession planning into the future. So we've achieved that, but we would need more people.
Councillor Seymour.
Thank you. I have a few questions and I thank you both very much for the document. So if we can start on page 72, it sounds like we're managing possums rather than eradicating them at the very top of number 11. So how does that fit with the pest-free grand plan of the country? Is that saying we're managing possums rather than eradicating them?
Through the chair, it is about managing rather than eradication. We haven't got the resources to actually focus on eradication. Certainly that sort of work will require a lot more input from staff resources as well as materials. So the answer would be no, it's more about management rather than eradication.
So we need, I mean, that's just a flag to councillors that in future LPPs or 10-year plans or 3-year plans, we need to prioritise it. And I see then on the bottom, excuse me, on the bottom of the same page, we're talking about site-led programs and PMAs. So later, I don't mean today, but will we be able to have a report against the amount of work that has been able to be done in PMAs? Because we have, for those of us who know what they are and have them on our properties, we do know that some work has been done, but not for quite a few years. And obviously landowners do some of their own work, but the rating falls quite substantially to large high-value capital properties across the district. So we'd like to know later in the year, maybe it's a 6-monthly report, how many PMAs have been attended to. And then on fanworm was something that always interests me. When did we last have an inspection for fanworm? And I see in here, I think it says we're going to do it twice a year. And I can't recall a report for some time. And I wonder when we last had an harbour inspection for fanworm. Do we know?
Through the chair, with the PMAs, certainly we are undertaking site-specific work around PMAs. We can certainly record the data around what we've done to date and probably future planning around a strategy around how we can best address pest issues in our PMA blocks. So that's certainly something we can work on towards a report. With regards to the Mediterranean fanworm, we've undertaken one survey this year, the 2021. We had a survey planned for this week. We've had to cancel that, obviously, because of the impending weather situation. So, yeah.
Weather obviously wasn't
Yeah.
helping us. Thank you.
So we have got another dive. Hopefully we get it done before the end of this financial.
And my final question relates to the residual track catch. Somewhere I saw in here, we were going for 7, and I thought about 4 was the number that was generally the residual track catch number on possum controls after an eradication had been through a PMA.
Through a PMA would be 5% RTC, not a 4, but certainly for the 2 types of monitor methods, we tend to use the white mark index, which is the wax tags, which gives us a wider coverage using that, and easy for our guys to cover the territory using the BMX, BMI type monitor. With the leg hold trap RTC, it's very labour intensive, and the guys have to carry a number of traps setting through some of our areas we're monitoring. So there is both tools we can use, but currently we're using the white marks index, and that gives us the RTC we're looking at, particularly with some of our PMAs of less. Certainly the target is 5% or less if we can achieve that, but then that requires a lot more intensive effort and resource to target that.
Just in relation to my question, on page 86, it is still saying we're going to achieve a post-operative monitoring target of less than 10% RTCs in the Hawke's Bay Regional Council buffer zone, and elsewhere 15%. And so we are quoting residual track catch.
So our focus for our monitoring and work is to target as low as we can, but certainly the benchmark in the plan is 10% on the Hawke's Bay buffer. Outside of that, it's a 15% RTC.
Well, with respect, 15% still leaves a lot of possums behind.
It does, yeah.
I mean, it is a real issue, and it's a real issue only because we know and live it, where we have possums, and you can shoot them every night, 4 nights a week through summer, and we just don't seem to be getting on top of them. We are so lucky we don't have a TB incursion. So I totally support the work that's done on our boundary with Hawke's Bay Regional Council, but I just don't think, and I know we've got huge areas. I mean, they're going to be a real pest in the replanting of palm oil. They'll damage new planting if they're through winter, if they're hungry. It just seems like we aren't doing as much as we used to do in Gisborne District Council or pest and possum control. And I could go on about weeds as well. So I've just drawn some against our walkway to the attention of council officers this morning. We just need to keep on top of pests and weeds and do it like it. I know it's tough on staff, but it is so important. Thank you for the report.
Thank you. The nature of our established agreements with the likes of DOC and Wakatahi, Kotahi and NZTA, are they robust and everyone under the good neighbour rule, everyone's pulling their weight?
I think with the first, when the regional pest management plan was implemented, I think we had pretty good buy-in from our Wakatahi as well as Tauranui roads. I think the indication of that is certainly some of the weed control along those corridors. What I will say is that we need to make sure that to maintain those gains, they need to do a follow-up maintenance on that, because I have noticed probably in some of the travelling around the district that I have seen regrowth coming back on some of those areas that have been targeted. So certainly something that the plan will work with these particular agencies to ensure that we maintain those gains.
Publication of our council conservation quorum document, and I'm so pleased to see that you are under management tools on page 97. We are going to be inserting material. Yet I hear on another front the council stopped the publication of it, was what I heard at the Waimata Valley meeting, and of course it's been drawn to our attention previously. Families are it's back. Great. Because families up the Waimata at that meeting, it was suggested that it was one publication farmers really read. So we are having one?
Yes, through the chairman, we have resurrected that. It's been quite a battle, but it really has a place. There is some change, and one of the bigger changes is it's probably going to be distributed digitally. But we need to be careful with the number of people who can't accept that in terms of who may have digital access or not. So we are going to leave copies at the likes of Te Puia and a range of other sites as well.
I would support the fact there should be some hard copies. I don't, older farmers sit down and read that with their morning tea or their lunch, and they're not going to go to their computer to read it. Younger ones might, but we've got a lot of farmers across the district that will actually will sit down and read the hard copies.
Yes, we're aware of that, and we have had a lot of inquiries of where is it, and so we have it back, and certainly take that on board.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Faulkner, then Councillor Sheldon. You want to hold your right of reply? Okay, yeah, Councillor Sheldon, Councillor Burdett.
Thank you. I'm really just referring to page 102 about sprays and things. We had the Waimata River group in here. When I see things like silicon penetration and all this sort of commentary, how safe's our water when people are going along on a ATV spraying stuff?
I think we are particularly careful on anything like that, and in all cases we ensure anything we're involved in is done to manufacturer specifications, and people are trained into those sorts of activities in this day and age. So health and safety requirements that are quite intense.
So nothing's getting into the water?
Well, as far as we know, we are monitoring that as close as we can.
Thank you.
Councillor Burdett.
Thank you. This is a very good detailed report. I'm just a bit disappointed that the budget is so small. In terms of, look at David smiling. I'm just concerned with all the good work Kerry and his team, the members that have done debris dams and planted huge amounts of willows and poplars all over the farms and up the Waiaku River. This coming spring, possums will play havoc. So I'm making a plea through the chair that you fellas consider going there on 2 or 3 occasions. Because while we have tried ourselves, I send my men out and they shoot sheep instead of possums.
They look so similar.
Yeah, because they're not looking for meat. But it is an issue because they've done such a good job and the trees are growing wonderfully. The possums can soon put paid to that. Yeah.
Councillor Worslam.
Yeah, so I reply to that. Next time we have recruitment, don't let any of your staff in on it. The interesting thing here is, yeah, we've done a lot of work on that, but we've also been able to build pest control into some of that outside being funded by GDC. So there's quite a bit of interest going on that. One of those crews up there keep a very close eye on what stock and animals are in the river. They've taken some real notice. They're sick of bumping in poles to see horses, cattle around them. So they're taking a far bigger role now than they were, and there's some initiatives out there that we may be able to deal with through MPI in terms of pest control on indigenous species, but those sites as well. So yeah, it all becomes part of it more so than in the past, and hopefully not too much of an impost on the council.
And supplementary to that, Mr. Chairman, Councillor Seymour alluded to the weeds on the side of the road. What's our position in terms of blackberry on our roads, on our network, on the side roads?
Through the chair, it's the roading people's under their control.
So it's the other day.
Pardon? Thank you.
Yeah, Councillor Worslam.
Yeah, I just want to highlight the budget relative to the size of the problem. This is bang for buck, hands down, where council in our plans looks after biodiversity. It's not, there's a lot of things that people have in their minds as biodiversity. This is hands down where we have the biggest impact, and it's really, really underfunded to an enormous extent. These guys have absolutely no hope of keeping tabs, much less, making gains on the encroachments, particularly of weeds, but also of pests. So I just want to say, look, I acknowledge that you guys are fighting an uphill battle, that that I think we need to get better at prioritising the work that you do, because once these things run away, they're almost impossible to get back. We've got massive areas of bush that you'll never eradicate some of these weed pests from if they're allowed to get established. So just on that, what is the size of your team to deliver on all this?
We have a manager, and there are 6 other staff doing both animal and pests and weed pests. So we're back to 7 from, we were at 4 until about this time last year.
Councillor Robertson.
Following on that, is any of your work subcontracted out?
Not from our biosecurity team, but certainly there is some work being contracted for Waiaki Waterworks, possum control work.
Councillor Hughes.
Oh yeah, just carrying on from Councillor Vedettes and Councillor Warsaw regarding the budget. So part of the reason I voted for spend more, do more for our biodiversity was for pest control. Is there any room to divert some of that into pest control and weed control and increase the budget?
Go, Dave.
Notice how quick I grabbed the mic then, councillors. So through the chair, the discussions for the budgets are your LTP discussions that are sitting there. As Kerry said, we're at capacity for what we can deliver now through this team. A number of things are delivered by other teams within council. So as Councillor Burdett alluded to, roading has a huge role to play, particularly when it comes to pest species of plants on the side of the road. Pampas, blackberry, the usual suspects. So there are other spends looking at this within areas. The biosecurity team are very much working with landowners and working with how they can help control pest species on their properties, but then also to maintain our borders. So it's a really important role that we play for the region. The budgets is a conversation for you to have at an LTP planning stage where we've set the budgets for the drafts for now. Separate conversation, Councillor Burdett, than for today.
Just clarification, sorry. So the increase in budget that was approved at the long-term plan for spend more, do more will not hit this team.
Through the chair, yes, it's for the biosecurity team. It's not for the rest of us. Happy to take more though. Voting will always take more.
Just a quick question. How's the pest a pest? My wife had 2 days in hospital a couple of days ago from a prick from a phoenix palm, and the surgeon that operated on her said it was really, really common. He said these are like lethal weapons, and they just pop up everywhere. What's the status of a phoenix palm? Yeah.
Through the chair, phoenix palms are certainly the lower end of our regional pest management plan, where pretty much it's the land occupiers' responsibility to remove, and certainly it's nothing new from what you're telling me about people getting injured by them. They are one of the probably plants you wouldn't want to have on your property, but they are here. It's how we manage them going forward to look at replacing them at some stage.
They don't actually have a status, those.
They are in our operational regional pest management plan. They have a status more around a site-led type category.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. All right, right a reply, Councillor Faulkner.
Not so much right a reply, but just
Summing up.
an endorsement there again, Phil and Kerry, of your teams, and encouragement Mr Wilson to collar as much funding as you possibly can for these teams. I have one final question, and that comes down to our regional authority capacity. And I'm thinking in terms of NZ Rail / Kiwi Rail. We talk here only about plant pests. Having said that, having both the State Highway 2 and Railway Corridor running through our area, yeah, it's also a tram track quite literally for mustelids, pukekos, cats, rats, possums, the whole 9 yards. How much flex do we have? How much capacity do we have to say to the likes of some of these big national bodies, you need to step up in our region? Because none of those animal pests are currently in their work program.
So through the chair, interesting enough, I had a conversation with the manager of the vegetation manager of Kiwi Rail, and they're telling us that the rail corridor between here and the closed section south of Gisborne has been leased out to 2 groups, and it's the 2 groups' responsibility to maintain that wee corridor. And they've pretty much said that they haven't got any resources to put to controlling weeds on that corridor. We haven't considered the pest animal component at this stage, but it's certainly something that we may be able to provide some advisory service to those that are impacted, particularly adjacent to the railway corridor, in terms of what can be done to help them rid them of those particular pests.
With all due respect and supplementary to that, Mr Wilson, surely we would have a role to play here, given that we are the regional authority.
So through the chair, we do have a role with the lessee. It's around Kiwi Rail have leased that line to other parties. So those parties are the ones that we need to be having those conversations with, not with Kiwi Rail. So the team needs to take it up with the 2 lessees rather than with Kiwi Rail going forward around those weeds. So you're right, Councillor, we do have a role around the enforcement of that still.
Thank you. It's been moved by Councillor Faulkner and seconded by Councillor Burdett. Nothing further. All those in favour? Carried. Page 107, the Waianaki Transformation Program. No. 116? No, this is 108. 107, sorry. Okay, Amy, is it? Yep. Taking as read, or you want to elaborate on anything? No, okay, we're taking this as read. Councillor Faulkner.
Again, happy to move this paper, and thank you to those who, to Amy for bringing it to us. My first question is the MOU progressing at an executive level. When do we hear from that around the team that was developed at the governance level? We seem to have heard nothing in that regard. So just I guess a timeline or a rundown on where we're at with that. Thank you.
Through the chair, it's my understanding that there's some work progressing in that space between TTPT and Maraitaha around the mandate for that group, and Nadine is currently leading that. So I can't give you an update on the timeline, I'm sorry. Nadine's not here.
Councillor Robinson.
Paragraph 8 talks about the plant supply. It's on page 110. So plant supply and planting contracts for the year have been finalised. Where have those plant supplies been sourced from? Is it local or a mix, or?
Through the chair, all the plant supply is local this year.
So further to that, are we ahead of the myrtle rust risk on these suppliers? There has been a supplier identified as having myrtle rust.
Through the chair, our plants are all coming from a local nursery that has protocols in place for treating or preventing myrtle rust. So they're applying fungicide regularly to the plants. We've spoken to NZPPI, the plant producers, and they've told us that the best advice that they've given to nurseries is to apply those fungicides. They're developing some new tools around predicting times of the year to apply those with regards to weather and limiting the fungicidal application, but there's not much more that can be done. Inspections, regular inspections of the plants, and if they're infected, then obviously we won't be using them.
Councillor Seymour?
Yeah, thanks very much for the report. How many people do you have working out in the project at the moment? Staff is not mentioned in that document.
Through the chair, at the moment, we still have myself and project manager here in council, and everybody else who's working on the project is through contracts. So we have a team up there at the moment doing wilding pine control. There's about 7 of them on the ground at the moment doing that, and we have a planting crew of about 5 who have started pre-planting preparation.
Great, thank you. And just a comment around the photographs which you put on the bottom of 111, which is great, lovely to see them. But can I tell you that that photo shown of 221, that is browsing by goats and deer. A native bush that was shut up for 50 years, and that's more than 50 years, which is what those 2 photographs are telling us, would have substantial, I mean, a really dense understory. So we are still getting a significant amount of damage in there from browsing goats and deer. And I guess that's what some of us feel really strongly about. We're putting a huge amount of money into replanting, which is brilliant, but it's just going to be wasted if we don't keep pest control up. And I see there's going to be some negotiation, I read in the paper, around how the quantum of deer, I gather, that are going to be allowed to stay there. I'm completely opposed to any deer being allowed to stay there, but I understand that that is an agreement that has been reached. But that is absolute evidence of browsing animals. We've got 50-year blocks cut up at home, and that's not what they look like. Shut up. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, that's just a noting report. We move. You moving or seconding? Question? All right, Councillor Wilson.
Just on paragraph 7, it talks about the wilding tree removal. You just heard there's 7 people employed for that. That's the wilding pines that cannot be removed manually will be removed by other means. Can I presume that that means currently we're controlling wilding pines by pulling them out by hand?
That's right.
What is the other means?
Spray them?
Through the chair, you're right, councillor, the other means would be to spray. So we would have the option of aerial desiccation prior to planting. That's used regularly in the forestry industry. Spot spraying would be applying a lot of herbicide in our water catchment. So the approach that we've gone down at the moment to limit the amount of herbicide in the catchment is through manual control. Obviously, this is the first year that we've done it, and we will continue to review whether that's going to be cost effective.
That's good to hear, thank you. And just on the subcommittee, I don't think it's met for, it must be close to a year. Is it being disbanded, do you know, or is it still existing?
So through the chair, I've been working previously with Judy Campbell, who was working on behalf of Marae Taha, the landowners. So what we're trying to work through, as you know, council's got a delicate balance between its relationship with the iwi entity and also practically on the ground what it looks like with landowners. So what we're trying to work through both with Ngāi Tā Manuhiri and Marae Taha is where the relationship should sit in terms of governance. So governance being your relationship with Ngāi Tā Manuhiri. Ordinarily in a co-management agreement, you'd have that relationship sits at the operations staff level. So for now, I'm just saying, well, let's just park it because it's sitting with Marae Taha and Ngāi Tā Manuhiri to work out their back of house as to then how we structure up and reshape that relationship. So it's on a pause at the moment. I can't give you timeframes because it's not sitting with us.
All right, thank you. That's been moved by Councillor Faulkner, second by Councillor Worsnop. Nothing further. All those in favour? Against? Carried. Page 116, the MAR disbanding. Councillor Worsnop, what have we got for this? Anyone? Is it David, is it? All right, at the back.
Yeah, so I may not have been aware of a meeting that took place, but if there hasn't been one, I'm just really want to highlight the fact that this group of people gave us quite a degree of service over a long period of time to come together to form this group, and kind of disbanding it without having a final meeting to discuss the next steps and would seem quite it just
Sorry,
feels
excuse me.
a bit
Ben,
dismissive.
Ben, this is you.
Whoops. Do you want me to start again?
Sorry, Gary.
All good.
Apologies, everyone. I thought the waves were friendly.
Sorry, yeah, my question was just around, obviously this has been a reasonably big body of work over a long period of time that we've had people volunteer their time for. And I just wanted to know whether or not we were disbanding purely, via email sort of thing, or whether the group were being offered the opportunity to come back together in a final meeting to actually discuss what their time and effort will have helped to go towards going forward. Has there been that meeting? If there hasn't been that meeting, is there going to be one? Because otherwise I feel like we're going to have some pretty disgruntled people saying, look, well, I feel like you've used our time and then we've just kind of been cast aside. And we wouldn't want to give them that impression, I don't think. Also, I think we'd all like to hear what their hopes were for the next steps.
Thank you, Councillor. All the email correspondence, all the correspondence today has been via email throughout the whole process, unless we brought the group together. Yes, there's been one, the subcommittee has come together once. Other groups have always come together. All our information requirements and all our information that we have distributed has always followed up. If you like to come and meet with us, we're happy to discuss. On this one particularly, we haven't gone further and said we'd like to convene one more time to discuss. We have sent out the final independent assessment that went out in early to mid-February. The executive summary there is pretty much straightforward. That says the aquifer is suitable, geologically and technically suitable, that we did, our approach was technically robust. Of course we can bring the group together. I'm not sure what we're going to, obviously there's some stakeholder management exercises, but in terms of value, it may not be beyond that.
Just, sorry, my question really stems from probably particularly the Makoti LTP meeting, where we were asked in, no uncertain terms, what are you doing? What are you going to do? When are you going to do it? And how do we feed into that process? And I guess I want some confidence that there's going to be an opportunity for those conversations to happen and that we can articulate that.
Yes, there will be very much process for those conversations to happen. That will be down the track, particularly as part of the Waipawa catchment plan work, which we hope to bring forward. But we're hoping to bring that forward, and it should be able to start next year. It's due to be wrapped up and notified by the end of 2024. It's got to start well ahead of that. Apologies, is that clearer? So the opportunity for the group to continue to feed back information to us will be through the Waipawa catchment planning process. We intend to kick that off, engagement on that next year, so before the middle of next year.
and that catchment plan has to be notified by the end of 2024 to meet our NPS freshwater management obligations.
So through the chair, sir, if I can just quickly jump in. So this is around the scientific trial that we had funding for. So the scientific trial has come to its natural end. We've spent the money and the funding that we had available for the injection. So this is around the injection trial. We've completed the injections that we were going to do. So it's that component that we're talking about disbanding now. When it comes to the future of the MAR or how it could operate, all of those things, those are conversations that we're going to move into, and a lot of those are wrapped up within the Waipawa Catchment Plan. The Waipawa Catchment Plan consultation is about to start, so it's happening soon. It's been said it has to be publicly notified by 2024, so that's the end process. However, there's a huge volume of work that needs to happen in the interceding part that goes through there. So that is going to be the consultation vehicle. This is the trial that we're talking about stopping because the funding's ended, the consent conditions have ended as well. So it's just that injection trial part.
Thank you. Councillor Faulkner.
Thank you for that clarification, Mr. Wilson. I would have to say that next steps due on the 30th of September. I mean, we're talking, we've got businesses out there that have invested a significant amount of time, expertise, money in a lot of cases, that probably are looking to get on with their business as a result of these trials. We've got the scientific data now. You're talking 2 years of stand down effectively. They're just being left in suspense. I find it extraordinary, actually, that we can't do anything any faster than that.
Comment on that, Councillor Seymour. Oh, thank you.
Through the chair. So no, we can't. I mean, the short and long of it is that they can, those that are interested can apply for a consent and some put themselves in line, but until there are fundamental amendments around our freshwater plan, until they've got iwi on board for further injection or otherwise for its extraction itself, there's not a lot that council can do in this space, and we haven't got the investment to put into it apart from linking it into what the rules are around our freshwater plan.
Thank you, Councillor Seymour.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you to the Chief Executive for that comment. But can I just say to you, just yesterday, I was asked really clearly, who makes the decisions for this district in here? Is it the council, or are we being driven by council officers? And this MAR project has been around for about 6 years, since the mid-term of the water plan development. It was raised, then people were brought to Gisborne. And we understood, I mean, I think we've already seen an email that said the plan committee was going to be disbanded, but I didn't think we understood that we were going to put the whole thing on hold and do nothing, which is actually what it sounds like, until we do the Waipawa catchment plan. We know we need to do catchment plans, and that's really important. But it just seems like to me that this is just absolute procrastination. I mean, the project is around the Makaurau aquifer, which is actually a discrete item. It's not the other aquifers. Industry have told us time and time again that water security is really important. We've done 2 trials at least, because we had some broken down equipment that didn't allow us to put the quantum of water into the trial that we expected to in the first trial. So we've definitely done 2 trials that I'm familiar with. It just seems to me that we don't listen to what we're being asked to do in the community, and that water security and quantum is hugely important for industry in this district that employs heaps and heaps of people. And I honestly can tell you, we are losing credibility because we are not seen to be hearing what industry is telling us. And they, with real goodwill, they sat around the table, as Councillor Faulkner had said, put time, effort, energy and money into doing work that was supposed to supplement the work we did. We all know that we had an obligation to maintain standards and be the regulator, but industry was happy to work alongside us so this project could get legs. And just is really disappointing that we use legislation which gets foisted on us left, right and centre to help to delay activity that we are doing in the town.
Nadine.
Thank you. Through the chair, as I said before, there's nothing stopping industry from going ahead and applying for a consent to do that. They now have the scientific information. The issue that we have now is one of a freshwater planning framework. But if there's something else that the councillors have intel from industry that they would like us to do, then I'm sure we'd be open to listening to that and then coming back with a paper as to whether we can actually deliver something.
So supplementary to that, are you suggesting that if the industry wanted to come together and meet with council officers with regard to next steps sooner than this, and sooner than what's conveyed in paper, that you would be open to that?
What I'm saying is that the industry now have the scientific data that they can use to then apply for a consent. The issue, again, is around our freshwater plan
Yeah, I heard
and
that,
being
but are
able
you
to do
open to a
that.
meeting?
I'm sure we've said that to our stakeholders in the letter to them, that we're open to discuss further with them around next steps. And we would like them to be engaged in our freshwater planning process.
Well, they have been since we started the plan, about 9 or 10 years ago.
Thank you, Councillor Seymour. I'm comfortable with the CEO's reply. Councillor Sheldrake.
Just on the back of that, I mean, I think it's probably more about how we communicate going forward, that we welcome the sort of feedback, or here's some opportunities could be communicated to those stakeholders.
Thank you. Councillor Gregory.
Thank you. I just want to support what Pat and Sandra were saying. The frustration that you hear from people is real. The last thing I heard at the meeting we did have was Graham Card. Is he still here? He was going to put in a consent for the next year so that they could inject again if they wanted to. Did that happen, and what was the result?
So the proposal there was to look at a further injection window within the current consent, but that was not going to provide us with any further information on the back of the final independent advice we had had. So it didn't seem necessary to go forward with that.
Yeah, I just want to highlight that we are, from the tone of some of these responses, missing the point, right? The point of the aquifer recharge trial was not to give industry more opportunity. It was to protect a declining and degrading aquifer. Where is the urgency around our environmental responsibility here? We have salinity raised as a very real prospect and an enormous risk to existing use, not to more use, as to the users using now. What kind of responsibility do we all have if we sit around this table 2 years' time and say, oh, actually, guys, we've got to turn off your taps because salinity is starting to pop up in all these other bores. And we could have started recharging a year and a half ago and we chose not to. It's for this table to decide what priority and urgency we give to things, and we can do things faster if we choose to. I'm uncomfortable with leaving it just to resolve itself as part of the freshwater plan when we know how urgently that aquifer needs to be addressed.
Your Worship.
Can I ask a question of the CEO going forward? So we hear all the concerns, valid concerns. I get those concerns in my office often. Will we get a timeline and a proper time frame with actions going forward so that we can communicate that well, not only to stakeholders that worked with us in this process, but make it clear to the community that we're not only ticking our own environmental responsibilities, that we're serving the business industry. They develop and expand with the assumption that there will be certain water quantities available. And I agree with what Councillor Worsnop said. That is not our main job. Our main job is to look after our taio, our environment. So you can hear the unrest amongst councillors. Can we get assurance that you can give us action timeline, who is going to be involved, so that we can look at that and see a way forward?
So through the chair, the detailed timeframe was going to be in that September report. So I just want to circle back again. This was a trial. The council was funded externally to deliver that trial. We have done the part that we were required to do. Now there's a holding pattern while we work through the freshwater plan timeframes and how they will be engaged in that. I hear, so in terms of the injection trial, that's the line that we've drawn here. It's finished, and we're saying let's disband the subcommittee so that we can then start refocusing on the other areas. I can't give certainty in terms of the aquifer itself and what that might look like going forward yet, because we haven't done that piece of work. And we're saying we need to go through the freshwater plan to deliver that. The other part in it too is that we're taking from, bearing in mind, we're taking water from the Waipawa that has many different iwi interests along there and putting it into an aquifer in another area. So there's some significant cultural interest that we are working through in here, which is why the freshwater plan is a place to be able to do that. What I can say at this time is it's September that you'll have some further information about that. If you want anything further, I just need clarity about what it is you want from us to continue with in terms of industry and the expectations there. I'm not quite sure what you're wanting from staff.
So I just think what is being said around the table is that I agree it was trials that was funded externally. And even though it was to take a look at how we inject, if we looked forward, people looked forward from that and say, well, if the trials are successful, X, Y, and Z can happen, and it's about water quantity. So I think business partners or councillors might look at the trial, but also those expectations that were set. So I think that is why there's a level of unrest in regards to the timelines. And just the last point I wanted to address, or not address, just query. I thought that our iwi partners were on this journey with us as part of the working group. I personally met with a few interested parties in the last year or so. So I just would like clarity on that. Thank you.
So through the chair, and I might get Joe to jump in terms of the technicalities, but when the last freshwater plan was created, we didn't have the new standards that have been put in place with the changing legislation, which now requires all councils to deliver our freshwater catchment plans by 2024, to give effect to Te Mana o Te Wai, which therefore requires us to then review our Waipawa plan, which therefore will have impacts to whatever consent is given to further recharging of the aquifer. So we can't with all certainty say to industry, yep, here's the pathway forward, because we have to review our plan in order to get there. So there are a number of unknowns at this stage. And with regard to iwi, no. So they're not all on board, not at all. So we do know that there are likely objections to come if there was going to be another consent, even if we were looking at trial. So you may have had some that one that may have been supportive, but the other one is not.
Thank you. Councillor Foster.
I'd just like to air my concerns as well. I mean, I've been involved with the Recharge Aquifer group right from the start, and different meetings that we've had with all the stakeholders, and to just stop at this level now, like we had a momentum going, and I know it was just trials, but I think everyone did recognise that it would continue, the conversation would continue. There's even management structures and everything like being discussed. Yeah, so I do have a concern that all of a sudden we're going to stop for quite a period of time, and there's going to be no progress. So I would at least like to see a stakeholders meeting to just to give some assurance that there is going to be a future to this. Otherwise, we've done this trial for no reason whatsoever and spent a lot of money. It is about a resource that is declining that we need to manage, and it's our role. So yeah, I've got the same concerns as everybody else around the place if we are going to just put a halt to it and wait for a plan, which we all know could take a long time. So.
Thank you. Okay, so that's been aired pretty well. The recommendation is only about disbanding the Managed Aquifer Recharge Subcommittee. Do I have a mover?
that confirms the disbanding. We're aware, obviously, that we've reached a point that we can't go any further. But we do it the courtesy of calling together a meeting of those stakeholders that have worked alongside us throughout the scientific trials. I think a meeting in person would at least be the courteous thing to do. I don't know how you want to word that, but.
I think that could happen without needing a recommendation on it. Yep. All right, so I'll move the recommendation. Do I have a seconder? No seconder? Are you, or are you not seconding? All those in favour? Against? Okay, that is. Okay, 4 show of hands, please. Yeah. This is this is purely a group for the scientific side of it.
Assurance that there's going to be a follow-up meeting with this group and other stakeholders, just to define the future, because it's all very well telling us here, but what goes out of the community is you know, there's a lot of uncertainties. So I'd like to make sure that there's certainty that a group, the people that have been involved and stakeholders involved will have a chance to sit around the table and be informed like we have now about what the future could be. But I would like to see some dialogue about this as well, because we owe it to our stakeholders. They've gone through a long period of consultation periods and trial and everything, and with these hopes that at the end of it, we're going to be able to replenish our resource. So yeah, I would like some certainty that this conversation is going to continue. I'm getting the impression that from this decision, that conversation is going to stop, and I don't want to see that.
Something that if this don't pass, that we instruct staff to meet up and discuss with the industry and people that were part of this trial and interested parties a way forward, and councillors. So can I please move that? Do I have a seconder for that? Thank you. Everyone is
all
included.
interested parties.
So thank you.
Okay, we need the wording for Coral, please, Your Worship.
Instruct staff.
Yeah.
No, that's lost.
So it's a new recommendation.
So this is
It's a new recommendation, that one's lost. Do you need Coral to read that out, or is everyone comfortable with that I move, that I put the motion? Okay, all those in favour? Against? Carried.
Please excuse me, sir, I need to go.
Okay, page 120, East Coast Township upgrade.
Lillian has done a great job. When we appointed her as the liaison officer for the Northern Region, she struggled a bit, but she's come to terms. This is a very good in-depth report. And in detail, she's told us what's going to happen over the next 2 or 3 years in terms of all the communities, including Manituka and Muriwai. So compliments to you, Lillian.
Thank you, Bill. Councillor Gregory.
I just wanted to check with the recommendation with that amount. It's not correct, is it? Because we voted to up that. Yeah.
Through the chair, this paper was actually drafted prior to the deliberations
Yeah,
last
I
week,
thought so,
so
but
it
I
needs
just
to
wanted
take
to
into account
make
the
sure that-
1.9.
Yeah, thanks for that. Sorry? Yep. Councillor Wilson. Councillor
Yeah,
Warsaw.
maybe.
It
I'd
is just for
support
noting.
that because I do note it. I think we've all noted it.
Yeah.
I do think it would be quite cool with the, once the long-term plan is adopted and we've got the new figures for this to come back before too long so we can see, and I'd really support included in that whether or not we are sticking with the chunky approach of township by township, because I note that we're actually quite boxed up in this, aren't we? Some are, they're all rolling over each other. We've kind of out of our 1 in 10 year rhythm anyway. Just whether this should come back, considering some of those things and with the new budget.
Through you, Chair, can I advise maybe that we bring back, once the funding has been approved, we'll bring back a rollout for the next LTP. So rather than this report coming back again, which is covering off East Cape, we'll bring you back a report that talks about how township plans will be rolled out for the long-term plan once you've approved your funding after that.
Cool. Thank you. Councillor Robertson, Councillor Seymour, Councillor Foster.
Thanks. So page 123, paragraph 13, second bullet point, talks about the progression on the upgrades of Manatuke Muriwai. And it says international freight delivery 4 to 6 months for the receipt of street lights and demand for installation of street lighting. What does that mean? And demand for installation? Saying that the township doesn't want it anymore, or is that the international demand for street lighting isn't impacting on us?
Through you, Chair. So this is in regarding to the rollout that we have here in Tauranui for our street lighting rollout. So we're halfway through the LED upgrades across all of our networks. So the teams that do the installation of the poles are going to be very far behind when it comes to rolling out Muriwai. So it's how we're factoring all the resource in. We've got a number of street lights, I'm sure you've seen them, that are flickering or are not working, which is common this time of year. We're completely at the mercy of international shipping. We have no replacements. There's no spares in stock anywhere in the country. So once we get those, we'll then be rolling it out. So it's around the rollout practicality wise here in region.
Thank you, Councillor Seymour.
Through you, Chair, this paper is regarding so my proposal will be to this paper go through and that we will bring a new paper once you have the budgets confirmed from the LTP for how the townships will be rolled out through that LTP process to keep the processes separate from each other. This is a noting report for the work done. Through your worship, it's accurate at time of print where you haven't adopted the new budgets for where we are now. So that's why I'm saying we do a supplementary report on the LTP once you've approved that, because this is accurate for these financial years that we're in now.
Yeah. Heather.
And through you, Chair, the minutes will reflect your conversation of this report in this place and time.
Yeah, thank you. Councillor Foster.
Yeah, just looking through like page 127, when you've got the budgets and then total estimated costs, including all the different desires from the community, and then external funding being sought, which is way more than twice as much as what we're actually funding. And this is on every project. Where is this money being looked at? Where is this money coming from?
Through the chair, we have applications in at Trust Taurawhiti and also through the TIF. So those are avenues, just 2 avenues in which we can seek external funding.
So is that just on a case-by-case basis or holistically on?
It's on a case-by-case basis as we design the aspirations of each township plan. We look at what things can be funded externally and what things should be funded within our budgets.
Thank you. I'll move noting the report. Seconder. Oh, you did. Yeah, that's right. Sorry, Bob. Second, Councillor Woolstomp. All those in favour? Against? Carried. Okay, that's public. We've got a small item in public excluded. Thank you. Move Bill. Second myself. Go into public. Excluded. Excluded. Yep. That's right. It's just yeah. So it's just an appendix to that Wainaki report. I'll move it. Second, Councillor Sheldrake. All those in favour? Against? Carried. Back into private. No, well, not quite, whatever it is. Moved by councillor Burnett, seconded by myself. And if there's no other matters of business, I'll close the meeting. Thank you for